phone, please. Can you let me know when it's on?
Chairman, we're just waiting for confirmation.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, the live stream has started.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to this virtual meeting of Cornwall Council's Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Before consideration of today's business, I will outline the protocols for the meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams, and it is also being recorded. When members are speaking, they may choose to use their video, but at all other times, please have your camera and microphone switched off. If the Council's live stream fails during the meeting and we cannot share the proceedings, I will adjourn the meeting so that access can be restored. If the issue cannot be resolved, I will halt the meeting and the remaining business will be concluded at a future date. If a member experiences a technical issue, I will adjourn for a short period to try to re-establish their connection. Members wishing to speak or ask a question should indicate by typing an X in the chat box, please. As I call members to speak, I will remind you to switch on your microphone. If for some reason you cannot be heard, the Democratic officer will advise you. Votes will be taken using a roll call procedure. The Democratic officer will read out the recommendation and the name of the proposer and seconder, and will then call each committee member's name in turn. You should confirm your name and advise whether you vote in favour or against the recommendation or whether you wish to abstain from the vote. The Democratic officer will then count the votes and advise the result accordingly. Where a member has declared a non-registerable interest, a disclosable pecuniary interest, or an interest by virtue of any trade union membership in a matter, they must leave the virtual meeting. Their departure will be confirmed and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at the appropriate time. Today we have a number of external officers with us in relation to the Cornwall Energy Recovery Centre roof damage and repairs item, and I would like to welcome Steve Daughtry, Matt Ives, Patrick Dawes and Victor Perez-Mares and Simon Gage to this meeting and thank them for attending. That's the end of my announcements, but before we start today's business, I'll ask the Democratic officer, that's Joe, to confirm members and officers' attendance for me, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. For the sake of the live stream, it's Joe Heather from Democratic Services speaking. So, Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny Committee members, I'm now going to call your name and please can you confirm your name and your electoral division. So I'm going to start in alphabetical order with Councillor Martin Alvey.
Good morning, Martin Alvey, Cornwall Councillor for Fiocc and Claim Place.
Councillor John Bastin.
Good morning, John Bastin, Councillor for Constantine, Mornan and Budop.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm Brown. Councillor Brown hasn't given apologies, Chairman, but he's not on the line at the moment. So, Councillor Nikki Chopak.
Good morning, Councillor Nikki Chopak, Poundstock Division.
Councillor Dominic Fairman.
Good morning, Dominic Fairman, St Tep and St Breward.
Councillor Pauline Giles.
Pauline Giles.
Councillor Giles, for me there was an issue with your sound. I'm not sure, Chairman, did you have an issue as well?
Yes, it was very, very muddled. I didn't hear. I knew it was her speaking, but I didn't hear what she said.
Councillor Giles, could you just confirm your name?
Sorry, my internet. Yeah, it's Councillor Giles.
I've lost you, Pauline.
Councillor Giles, We can just hear you. Leanne Martin, who's also here from Democratic Services, who's our producer, I'll ask her if she can contact you and we can see if we can sort out your issue. But we know that you're here. Thank you. So next is Councillor Fred Greenslade.
Good morning, everyone. Fred Greenslade, St Denis and Nanpian Division.
Councillor Steve Knightley.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all very well. Weybridge East.
Thank you. Councillor Matt Luke.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Matt Luke, Pembrokeshire and Boscoffer Division.
Councillor Cornelius Olivier. Chairman, Councillor Olivier hasn't given his apologies either, but he's not on the line at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
And then Councillor Carolyn Rule.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Councillor Carolyn Rule, representing Mullion and Grade Ruin. Thank you.
Councillor John Simmons.
Yes, good morning. Councillor John Simmons for Myler East, Penryn East and Myler.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Thomas.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Mike Thomas representing Helston North.
And Councillor Kevin Towell.
Good morning. Councillor Kevin Towell, Newquay Treferris.
Thank you. And now I'll just run through the, before that actually, I'm just going to ask the Cabinet members here who are here today, if they perhaps like to introduce themselves. We have Councillor Hannaford, Portfolio Holder for Climate Change and Neighbourhoods.
Good morning, Councillor Edwina Hannaford, Portfolio Holder for Climate Change and Neighbourhoods, representing Lew West, Llansallas and Llanteglos Division.
Thank you. And also then Councillor Rob Nolan, Portfolio Holder for Environment and Public Protection.
Good morning, Councillor Rob Nolan, Environment and Public Protection and representing Truro Redanic. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, Councillor Adam Painter, who's the Deputy Leader of the Council, will be joining us at some stage, but I don't think he's on the line at the moment. And then I'll just introduce you and tell you about the officers who are in attendance today during the meeting. So first of all, for the Neighbourhoods Directorate, we have Sophie Hosking, who's the Strategic Director Neighbourhoods. From Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service, we have Mark Hewitt, Interim Chief Fire Officer, and also accompanying him, we have Catherine Billing. From Communities and Public Protection, we have Alan Hampshire, Service Director, Neighbourhoods and Public Protection. We have Mark Luxton, Head of Community Protection, Licensing and Enforcement. We have Kevin Brader, Community Protection Team Manager. From Environment Service, we have Peter Marsh, Service Director, Environment. We have Dave Watkins, Flood and Coastal Environment Lead. We have, at the moment, I don't think she's on the line, but hopefully later on, we should be being joined by Jackie Ward, who's the Head of Waste. We have Dale Unsworth, the Integrated Waste Management Contract Team Leader. We have Victoria Parker, the Integrated Waste Management Contracts Project Officer. From Finance, we have Tracy Stepney, Strategic Finance Manager. We also have Melissa Dyer, Controls Team Leader. And from Democratic Services, we have myself, Jo Heather, Democratic and Governance Officer, who's supporting the meeting. And we also have my colleague, Leanne Martin, who's also a Democratic and Governance Officer, and she's producing the meeting. And as the Chairman has already mentioned, we have external officers also in attendance. We have Steve Dowtrey, Matt Ives, Patrick Dawes and Victor Perez-Mez, and we also have Simon Gage. So back to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. That was there's lots of people here today, isn't there? So looking forward to an interesting meeting, as they usually are. Right, so we go back to the normal agenda then. First item is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, Jo?
So, Chairman, we don't have any apologies.
Right, thank you. Second item is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest they wish to make on any item on this agenda, please? I think Martin wanted to.
Yes, Chair, I'm just going to declare for oh God, which item is it now? Sorry, I'm having a lot of trouble with my internet this morning. For item 6, I do actually work with Suez with regard to St Blazey Recycle. Thank you.
My darling. Thank you, Pauline. That's Councillor Giles. Thank you very much. And Councillor Alvey.
Thank you, Chair. And relating to item 5, just to declare that I'm a trustee of the Cornwall Community Flood Forum, which is has a contract with Cornwall Council, but it's not a pecuniary interest, so I will remain in the meeting.
Okay, Martin, thank you very much. Anybody else want to make any declarations of interest? No, right. Moving on then. The next item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of October 2020. You have all had those before, so hopefully you will, I've got you down, Mike. Hopefully you will be able to recommend that they are a true record of that meeting. I'm happy to propose that. And can I ask my Vice Chairman Dominic to second that, and then we'll come to Mike because Mike has a bit of an update for us.
Yep.
So Dominic, are you happy to second?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much, my love. Now, Mike Thomas, you wanted to say something on the minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Yes, page 2, item 10, provision of an update regarding 5G and the capacity of real-time monitoring. I'm very grateful to Officer James Langley for getting back to me very quickly, and we both agreed that this offers great potential in the future, but the technology is not yet far advanced enough to actually look at this as a serious option. This did come out of a presentation at Tolvaden by BT to the West Cornwall CCTV group. So I'm very grateful for James. It looks to the future in a sense when 5G is everywhere, and there's the potential then to use that technology for exciting things like the monitoring of air in our streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. That's interesting. Right, can I now go across to Joe Heather, please, to do the roll call for the minutes acceptance, please. It's proposed by myself and seconded by Councillor Fairman.
Thank you, Chairman. So as the Chairman has just stated, all the voting today on our items will be by roll call. So I'll now call out each committee member's name in turn. Please will you advise me whether you vote in favour or against the recommendation, or whether you wish to abstain from the vote. I'll then count the votes and advise the result accordingly. And you'll be voting on a resolution to accept the minutes as a true record of the last meeting on the 1st of October 2020. So starting off with Councillor Martin Alvey.
For.
Councillor John Bastin.
Abstain. I wasn't there, Joe.
Yeah. Councillor Malcolm Brown. Councillor Brown hasn't joined the meeting yet. Councillor Nikki Chopak.
I need to abstain because I wasn't there, sorry.
Okay. Councillor Dominic Fairman.
For.
Councillor Pauline Giles.
For.
Councillor Fred Greenslade.
For.
Councillor Steve Knightley. Councillor Knightley, are you there?
Yeah, for.
Thank you. Councillor Matt Luke.
For.
Councillor Cornelius Olivier. Chairman again, Councillor Olivier is not on the line at the moment. Councillor Carolyn Rull.
For.
John Simmons.
For.
Mike Thomas.
For.
Councillor Kevin Towell.
For.
Thank you. So the vote is carried, Chairman. We have 14 members on the committee at the moment because we have one vacancy. There were 12 members in attendance at the moment to vote. We have 10 in favour and 2 abstentions, so the motion is carried.
Thank you, Councillor, sorry, Joe. I'll just call you Joe, it's easier, isn't it? Thank you, my love, that's lovely. Right, now we move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is public questions. Do we have any public questions, please? Joe, you're muted.
Yes, apologies, Chairman, for the delay. No, we have no public questions today.
Right, thank you very much for that. That's lovely. So now we move on to item 5, which is the pre-decision scrutiny policy development. And item 5 is about flooding and coastal erosion risk management annual report. And I'm looking to Dave Watkins to share his screen. I think you've got a presentation for us, Dave, I believe.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'll try and share my screen now. Hopefully that's worked.
Yes, that's working, Dave. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. My name's Dave Watkins. I'm the Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Lead within the Environment Service of Cornwall Council. So I'm bringing 2 items today to you, Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 of the report. And I'll be asking you to please recommend both of these documents to the Cabinet Member Portfolio Holder for approval. So the Local Flood Risk Management Strategy was first produced in 2014. It's a statutory requirement for us to produce this, and in 2014 we did say at the time that we would review this every 6 years to keep it current. So now it's 2020, so this is the first refresh of that flood risk management strategy. That strategy also recommended that we produce an annual report to bring to you, and that's the other item that I'm bringing to you as Appendix 1. So both of these items really stem from the 2014 strategy. So just to confuse things further, I'd like to cover the refresh of the strategy first, which is Appendix 2, and then give you a quick overview of the annual report, which is Appendix 1. As I said, we agreed to review the strategy every 6 years just to keep it current. It's very much a light refresh because there was nothing wrong with the old strategy, but it's a good idea to review it periodically just to make sure that it stays up to date. There's a slightly new look to it, purely so that you can see that it's a new strategy and you're not looking at the old document, so that you can pick it up and see that it has changed. As I said, it's a fairly light touch review, or a refresh rather. It sets out the approach in Cornwall Council to how we approach flooding and coastal erosion from a strategic view. As I said, it's a statutory requirement of the Flood and Water Management Act that we produce this as Cornwall Council as the lead local flood authority for Cornwall. What we've done, there are 6 themes. There were six themes in the original 2014 version. We slightly renamed some of them just to make them a little bit more current and up to date. And what we've done within the strategy is for each of these 6 themes, set out the aims of the theme. We've summarised the actions that we're taking under each theme. And quite importantly, we've actually listed some of our achievements over the last 6 years to show that we are actually following our strategy. What we've done is put a slightly greater emphasis on certain aspects of this. As I said, there was nothing wrong with the old strategy, but it is a good idea to review it and keep it current. So we put a little bit more emphasis onto natural solutions or natural flood management. We've taken into account the climate change emergency and put a little bit more emphasis on that accordingly. And property flood resilience is something that we're getting more into. It's where you can't actually stop everywhere from flooding, so you make places more resilient to them. Each local flood risk management strategy should be particular to the area, and our area is Cornwall. So our strategy would be very different, say, to a metropolitan area such as, say, Plymouth, which is also a lead local flood authority. They would have a very different strategy to us purely because of the geographical nature. And what we've done is we've looked at Cornwall's nature. So Cornwall is obviously a rural area, though we do have urban areas within it. And obviously the coast is very important in Cornwall, one of our greatest assets. And this is about not just flooding, but also flooding and coastal erosion risk management. And I think it's very important that we take a place-shaped approach to this. So the community is really at the heart of everything we do here. It's the communities that we're trying to make resilient against flooding and to adapt them to coastal erosion. So the main themes are we are rural, we are urban, we are coastal, and we are communities. So that's really just a very quick overview of the strategy. You've got it in your pack so that you hopefully you've managed to look through it at your leisure. A quick overview of the annual report. The first few sections are really just setting the scene. They're there for reference. So it really sets out how the framework within local flood risk management and flood and coastal erosion risk management works, how we interact with our partners, how we claim funding from central government for schemes, and it just sort of sets out that framework that we work within. There's then a section 4 which just reviews the flood events of the previous year. The year runs from July to June, and the reason for that is so that we're not splitting up by calendar years, so that if we have a wet winter we incorporate all of that winter and we don't have an artificial calendar cut off. So that's why it runs from July to June of each year. There's then a fairly hefty section on schemes, just to show you what we've been doing, what we're working on. And I've included not just the schemes that are led by Cornwall Council, but also our partners, our risk management authority partners, which are the Environment Agency and also South West Water. So our partnership and working with those organisations is of paramount importance in the field of flood and coastal erosion risk management. Section 6 looks at the coastal side of things and shoreline management, and the shoreline management plan is something that's very important to us in Cornwall. There's a short section on bathing water quality, and this isn't a flood and coastal erosion risk management issue, but when I produced the first report in 2016, I think it was, I was asked to include this as a topic of interest to councillors, so we've continued to do that. Section 8 looks more at the strategic aspect and the obvious importance of climate change and adaptation to climate change within this field. Section 9 I've already covered, which introduces the refresh of the local flood risk management strategy, and there are recommendations to continue this work in section 10. So a quick look back at the year weather-wise. I've actually listed the main storms here since the last NOS committee rather than through the June to July, because there's a couple of important bits there that I'd like to just touch on. Generally, last spring was drier than average and the other 3 seasons were wetter than average. We've actually had 9 named storms in the last 12 months, and I think Ellen and Francis are the interesting ones there, because it's very unusual to get a named storm in August, and to get 2 named storms in August is actually unprecedented. So the question is, was it a late end to the 1920 season, or was it an early start to the 2021 season? I'll leave that thought with you. In the last 12 months, we've had over 300 properties flooded internally within Cornwall, but many more are affected by flooding. So we record all those that flooded internally, where water has actually ingressed into a property, and we try and make note of those that are actually affected. So if your garage flooded, your garden flooded, or importantly, your access to your property flooded, then you're not a flooded property, but you are affected by flooding. And we've received over 2,000 flood-related calls to the call centre within the last 12 months. The numbers aren't as high as they were in 2013-14, so it hasn't been a particularly bad year for flooding. Slightly higher than in the last few previous years, but I think a lot of that is related to the fact that we're actually getting better at recording flooding. We've got a good relationship with fire and rescue, with emergency services, with the call centre and with highways. So we are actually getting better, I think, at recording and keeping track of areas that flood. And this is important because then it helps direct where we put our efforts. The main flood event, I think, that of distinction this year was just before Christmas, when Hale flooded, and you will hopefully remember this because the A30 was closed, which is very unusual. A 7-mile section had to be closed by Highways England. We had 42 properties flooded internally within Hale itself, but many more also flooded on the outskirts of Hale. It's a fairly localised event, which we often get in Cornwall, and it's very much a muddy flood. There was an awful lot of mud left on the roads afterwards. So it was a very wet time, and the water levels within the River Hale were the highest recorded since 1968. So flooding was going to happen anyway, but very much exacerbated by agricultural runoff, as evidenced by the silt within the water afterwards. Again, something that we're quite used to in Cornwall. So what have we been doing? I won't go through all the duties that we have under the Flood and Water Management Act, but we do have statutory requirements that we have to follow on behalf of Cornwall Council. We've been putting a lot of effort into property flood resilience this year, and I think I mentioned last year we were just about to start a project for which we got DEFRA funding as what's called a Pathfinder project. Cornwall was one of only 3 areas within the country to receive this funding, which we applied for. It's a very exciting project, and please do have a look at the website. We have a dedicated website to support this project, and we're trying to increase the uptake of property resilience measures. That website is still under development, but it will change, it will develop, it will become more user-friendly as time goes on. Please feedback on any comments you have on that, and please do take a chance to look at it. It's a very easy address to remember, just www.befloodready.uk. That has turned into almost £1 million project. It's not just in Cornwall. Cornwall Council is leading on it, but we're also covering Devon and the other lead local flood authorities that make up the southwest within that project. We're working very, very closely with Cornwall Community Flood Forum to help us deliver this in Cornwall, and with the Devon Community Resilience Forum in Devon. It's been a busy time on the shoreline management plan because this is also going through a national refresh. We did a mini refresh of our shoreline management plan for Cornwall back in 2016. The government thought that was a great idea and decided to do it nationally across all 20 SMP areas. So they've been working on that refresh this year. It's continuing. Phase 1 has just completed. We're fairly heavily involved in working groups nationally on this. We've been working on coastal change management areas through the shoreline management plan, and we're seen as perhaps leaders nationally in this area. And we're also involved in the climate change DPD and trying to encourage shoreline and flooding adaptation within planning through that process. We worked on a lot of projects, which you'll see within the report. I'm not going to go through them all, but I'm just going to showcase one of them because this is a project which is just coming to an end now. It's been a really exciting project that I think we should be proud of. And this is the Long Lock Coastal Strategic Improvements Project, where we've put some rock armour in at Long Lock to protect the railway, to protect the A30, to protect the residential and commercial properties behind the railway. And rock armour, it's a little bit like an iceberg. Most of it's underground. You only see the tip of it. A lot of the engineering is out of sight, but it's a very solid structure. The sand may move around in a storm. Hopefully the rocks won't. But we've taken quite a novel approach to this, in that the rock armour is further out and further down than it would be in a traditional engineering sense, and that's to encourage environmental growth. So the railway is actually built on a backshore sand dune, which was eroding rather rapidly. Hopefully the work that we've done here will cause the sand to accumulate within the shadow of the rock armour and actually build up again. So it's a more environmentally friendly approach to shoreline management. And as part of that project, which is funded partly by UK government flood defence grant and partly by ERDF European funding, we've also managed to extend the project to do some environmental improvements at Marrows Iron Marsh. So we're really bringing in the environmental growth aspects of this. And we've been doing reed clearance to bring this SSSI and special protection area from a failing state into an improving state. And in the bottom right here, you'll see a new penstock on the outlet to Long Lock Pool, which is automated. And what it does is it keeps the water level high in summer, which is good in nature, and low in winter, which is good for flood control. So that project actually completes next month after about a 4-year process. So that takes me on to my recommendations. So I'd like to ask you, please, would you recommend approval of the annual report to the portfolio holder, and will you please recommend approval of the local flood risk management strategy refresh to the portfolio holder? And so I'll take any questions and comments and discussion there and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Dave. That was fascinating, especially seeing the pictures at Long Lock. I think I've got a bit of an echo. I hope that's you hear me all right. Right, if any colleagues have any questions for Dave, can you put an X in the chat box for me, please? I see that Dominic has put an X in, so can I come to Dominic first, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, Dave. Both excellent reports, really important, and I'm really glad that we've retained the scrutiny of these even on our work plan, even though it's not a statutory obligation now. So I very much welcome the emphasis on natural flood management, and I congratulate you and the team of the work at Maritime Marsh. I very much welcome the emphasis on promoting property flood resilience and the Be Flood Ready scheme website and the promotion of that. I do wonder if you would welcome a recommendation, because I noticed on your 9 recommendations for the FCERM annual report that you haven't included a recommendation around property flood resilience, and I wondered if you would welcome that as a suggestion to include that as a 10th one. I worry very much about agricultural runoff. It seems to be a growing problem, and I just wanted to know that when Cormac go around and clear silted up gullies and drains, do we then, if they see an ongoing problem, do we then open up conversations with landowners, and how do we engage with landowners to make them aware of perhaps mitigation practices they could be doing? I worry a lot, and I've raised this to full council, about the combined sewer outflows, and I wonder if this is something that we now have at least put a cap on. So is this a problem that we've addressed fully, and have we stopped this in new developments, or is there still an issue? And I've raised this at the Flood and Coastal Committee because I'm not sure planning committees are always aware that if they challenge applications that then are lost at appeal with the planning inspectorate, sometimes the flood mitigation conditions to planning applications get lost at appeal. And I've raised this with planning, and I don't know whether but I would wonder if you would welcome a recommendation that planning committee, this is raised in a planning committee training. I find your list of vulnerable coastal communities very sobering. Me and my wife have undertaken to walk the entire footpath for the last 2 years, so I know many of the areas you're looking at. It was only the other day we passed Coverack, and to the right of all the excellent work that was done in the light of the downstream flooding a couple of years ago, it's very evident that the cliff is very soft to the right, and there are a lot of properties above it. So I hope that we're going to find the funding to bring that scheme forward. And also, I'd just like to make other members aware that we did a field trip to Westward Ho with the Environment Agency, or maybe a couple of years ago. And when you engage with communities about what's happening with coastal erosion, it's very hard to get the science across when people really all they want you to do is build big walls to stop the flooding in their villages and towns. And at Westward Ho, the solutions didn't always gather community support because it is hard to understand the science. It's very technical. And then finally, your pipeline schemes that have the largest funding gaps at the moment, particularly Lou, I just wondered what your confidence is and what options we can explore. So sorry for the long list of questions, but with regard, when I've had listened to your answers, I might have some recommendations to put to the committee, please.
Thanks, Dominic. Can I come to you, Dave, and anybody else that you think would be able to answer those questions, but you primarily, I guess. You're muted at the moment, love.
That's the word of the year, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Leanne was saying we want to get T-shirts printed.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Fairman. That's quite a long list to address, so forgive me if some of those topics have fallen off my list here. Sorry for all the acronyms. PFR, Property Flood Resilience. I didn't include it as a recommendation, but it is beefed up in the local flood risk management strategy. So whether you want a recommendation, we could consider it, certainly. The PFR Pathfinder project is looking to boost uptake of property flood resilience measures. What it can't do is actually pay to implement them. But we do have a sister project which is actually looking at implementing, making grants available and helping people through the process of implementing PFR and doing it properly. So it's not just a case of buying a flood door at B&Q and bolting it in. You need to make sure it's the right technique for your property, and you need to first of all make sure that you do have a flood risk and this is the right response. So we have secured some funding from Cornwall Council as a capital project to help people do this. We've managed to match that funding from the Environment Agency. So for every £1 Cornwall Council puts in, the government also puts in £1. And we have a fairly challenging target to try and make probably about 30 properties flood resilient by the end of this financial year. We'd like that to continue as an ongoing rolling programme, and we are applying to Cornwall Council to continue that funding, and we're applying to the Environment Agency to continue matching that funding in the future. Agricultural runoff is quite a difficult one. If a farmer is, the worst thing is ploughing the wrong way on the contours on a field, ploughing up and down instead of across. There are reasons why they do this. Daffodils and maize continue to be our problem crops from a flooding point of view. If water is causing an issue on the highway, then highways can contact the landowner and make representation. The Environment Agency now has powers to enforce landowners to stop causing agricultural runoff, but only on the grounds of pollution. So they have powers if there's silt in the water, but they don't have powers for clean water. And that is an issue. We're working with Cornwall Catchment Partnership and with Cornwall Wildlife Trust to create something called a land hub, where we'll be working with landowners and farmers and helping them identify how they can improve their practices to reduce runoff from agricultural land. So that's something which we're just starting on at the moment. Combined sewer overflows has always been a historical problem. Within planning these days, we do not allow new developments to connect to the foul or combined water systems unless there's absolutely no choice, because they do actually have a statutory right to do so. However, we all recognise that this is an issue. A new development this year is that all water companies now have to produce something called a drainage and wastewater management plan, and part of this is aimed at reducing pressures on the combined sewer system. So hopefully we'll get less combined sewer overflows in the future, but it's a slow process, it's a difficult issue because it's just how the historic sewerage system was put together. Your point about new developments, how we lose control of conditions if a development goes to appeal. It's a very valid one. We have had this in Cornwall, and also it's been noted through the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee that there's been some instances in Devon. So this is where we may have a planning application. As part of it, we've said, okay, we'll condition this if you do X, Y, and Z in order to reduce or mitigate against flooding. If that gets turned down and it goes to appeal, we lose those conditions. And I think that's the issue you're addressing. I think it's a national issue, not just in Cornwall. It's one that really we need to take to the planning inspectorate, perhaps rather than the planning team within Cornwall Council, who I think are quite aware of the issue. Coverack, we are trying to build a new section of seawall there. We've had a few stumbling blocks, mainly over cost. However, it's extremely important because it's protecting the highway, and I've been told that highways will pay for this scheme. We'll get what we can out of local government, but it'll only stretch it to about 25% of the scheme cost. But it's so important, we will have to do it. So that's in the process of going through scoping for the environmental impact assessment, and then it'll be coming for planning permission. So hopefully we'll make a start on that in the spring. Coastal adaptation is really going to be key in the coming years and decades, to be honest. If you don't go to the sea will come to you eventually in the long term. and dealing with communities, communicating with communities is really key to this. And we've got quite an exciting project on at Bude at the moment, which is actually run by the Environment Agency. But they're working on this at the moment to do modelling and visualisation of how the shoreline might evolve over the next few decades, with a view to going to the public and saying, look, these are the options. That we're not saying this is what we're going to do, but this is what's going to happen. And you have an opportunity to be part of that process. I know that there are certain people in Bude who would like to see a lot of concrete walls just to hold the sea back. That's not sustainable, and we need to get that message across to people. But I think Bude is a good pilot of how we might actually then communicate with or engage with other communities, and through visualization showing them what's happening and how sand dunes, etc., might develop. On funding, the flood defence grant and aid, we're just entering, we're coming to the end of the first 6-year programme and preparing for the next 6-year programme that starts in 2021. It's difficult to look ahead 6 years because quite often what we need to do, we don't actually know it yet, because floods will happen in places we hadn't expected them to, and we'll need to respond to those. But we have put together our outline 6-year programme to DEFRA, and they'll be making a decision on that in the spring. The government 6-year programme, the 2014 to 2020, was £2.6 billion. They've recognised this year that it's not enough, that we've done the easy ones and it's the hard, expensive ones that are left to do. So they've doubled the budget to 5.2 billion nationally. Whether that stays, I don't know, depending on the national financial situation. We'll just have to wait and see, but that's the amount of money that the government has allocated. And there are other funds which come up on an ad hoc basis, and we never miss an opportunity to apply for those. So I don't know if that covers all of your points, Councillor. Please come back to me if I haven't.
Congratulations, Dave, because there was a great list of them there.
So that's brilliant. Just so I can lick my sorry, Chair, through you. Just so I can lick my recommendations into shape. So I'm saying that you wouldn't not welcome a inclusion of property flood resilience in the recommendations, but you would also like us to perhaps recommend that the funding for the Pathfinder project is continued. That makes sense?
It's not for the Pathfinder. The Pathfinder, we have funding from DEFRA, but the capital programme funding from Cornwall Council we would like to continue.
Capital funding programme?
Yes, it's the one that actually allows us to help deliver PFR rather than just promoting its use and explaining what it is.
And when it comes to the planning one, you think it's not just the training for our own councillors, but we should be lobbying the planning inspectorate? Yeah.
I think I think lobbying the planning inspectorate not to automatically delete all conditions of a planning if it's overturned at appeal.
And then finally, with the coastal erosion, I've tried raising this before, but it's a bit of a minefield. The coastal footpath, which doesn't seem to sit neatly with anybody, but is an important strategic asset. And while I've been wandering it as a farmer, I've often thought that we should be lobbying DEFRA that under their new sort of public money for public goods, farmers should be encouraged to conserve a wide coastal margin for the benefit of all the maritime wildlife, but also for the security of the footpath. Because if they farm right up to the edge and the bit of the footpath slips away, there's then protracted negotiations or nowhere to go for alternative routes. And increasingly, I'm finding on the footpath that it's diverted inland, which is a shame.
Yeah, I mean, we will continue to need to keep diverting the footpath inland, I'm afraid, and in some places that's quite difficult. If it's developed right up to the edge, you do sometimes have to go quite a way inland to get around existing developments. I think I don't know what powers we have over stopping farmers from going right up to the edge, but But we do have powers over new developments, and this is where the climate change DPD is quite important, I think. I won't go through everything that we're trying to do there, but the first thing we need to do is to stop new developments, because that's just putting fuel on the fire, as it were. It's one thing to sort of move existing developments inland, which is rollback, which will become a huge issue in Cornwall probably around about the 2040s, 2050s. But we need to stop adding to that by building new developments in unsustainable places. And that's what we're trying to do through the climate change DPD. And we do recognise in that if you are developing close to the coast, you do need to leave a margin for the footpath to move inland, as well as for natural erosion. And it's amazing how difficult it is actually to stop people from building on top of crumbly cliffs, because they don't realise how short term that coastline is. So that's the first thing to do, is to stop new developments, and then think about how we perhaps roll back and certain communities further inland.
So I wasn't thinking of powers over farmers, there's more in financial rewards, encouragement.
Well, certainly.
Can I stop you both now, because you had quite I've got other people waiting to ask questions, Dominic, sorry. Mike Thomas, thank you for waiting, darling, and also I've got John Baston. So Mike Thomas first, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dave, for your answers to the encyclopedic questioning from John. I think he's the new John Humphreys. I think brilliant, and he's covered a whole range of issues, and I fully support his comments about agricultural runoff and coastal erosion, which I witnessed at Porthleven the other day. I saw about 4 times the path near Porthleven low bar has been moved back from the edge of the coast. But I'm sorry, mine is a more parochial question. Really, every time I read through the reports, which are very, very interesting, I'm looking for something that I can recognise, and of course, that the Helston scheme isn't referenced. I don't know why it's not there. The Environment Agency one, I expected to see it to be on page 30 as a developing scheme. There are 2 there, as I'm sure you know all about. One is almost finished. The other one was finished and was interrupted by a lot of those storms that you referenced. And that's the new pipe through Low Bar. It's referenced on the gov.gov page, and it shows that it stopped in April because of problems with supplies. And this is the one for St John's area of Helston, where they're building walls, but they haven't finished it yet. So I'm just wondering why it's not in the section of 5.2.2 developing EA schemes.
Yes, good point. I'm not sure why it isn't in there. I compiled the section on the Environment Agency schemes from the Environment Agency quarterly reports, and I didn't find reference to Helston in the recent ones. I can go back and have a look at that and add something in. It is an Environment Agency led scheme, so we don't have a day-to-day interaction with it, though obviously on all schemes we work closely with the Environment Agency and help them to deliver it. So I will revisit that one.
Thank you.
And find out what progress in the last 12 months should be included in that.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. And it's a £2 million scheme, and it just makes people in Helston suddenly feel constantly ignored, that even their £2 million schemes aren't even referenced. And it's a fantastic opportunity for the Environment Agency again to show what it's achieved for the area. I'd just welcome some sort of reason, perhaps why it's, or understanding why it's not there. Thank you.
I will add it in.
Thank you, Dave. That'll be good, because it should be there, as Mike said. Thank you for raising that, Mike. That's good. And then I've got John Baston, please.
Sorry, Chair. Good morning, and good morning, Dave. A question and an observation, really. Going back to the coastal adaptation and erosion, presumably that's going to be more of a south coast issue than a north coast, and would there be perhaps priority for just letting somewhere flood? I'm a little bit parochial in as much as my patch is around the Helford, and the Helford has got lots of little inlets, which are obviously going to do just that unless we do something. And in some ways it makes sense really to just let them go on with it and flood, and save other areas. And the observation, and this is the agricultural runoff, is that Cornish fields were small by design, I think, and the trouble is we've lost so many hedges and we've lost, you know, to make these fields cope with these mega tractors, so I say, that is in itself a problem, isn't it? That, you know, small fields would tend to hold water more than the big ones. But if you could just sort of give me a view, really, perhaps on south coast erosion as opposed to north, that would be good. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, I wouldn't say either the south or the north was more vulnerable to erosion, but they're slightly different because we've got more gently sloping land and estuaries on the south coast, and we tend to have more vertical cliffs on the north coast. And that's actually an outcome from the last glaciation, where the ice sort of pushed out to the south, came over the Irish Sea, pushed across Cornwall, and it's really sort of shaped our landscape from there. On the south coast, we'll probably find that coastal flooding may be more of an issue rather than erosion. On the north coast, you know, you get cliff falls. And it's very, very difficult to predict. You know, we say that the coast may be eroding at an average rate of so many meters per decade or 100 years, but it's not a slow process. It'll suddenly go at once in one place, and it's that cumulative effect. But also, it's not just cliffs, it's also sand dunes. Coastal sand dunes are a very important natural coastal defence, and hopefully they will sort of move with sea level rise. And continue to protect us. So we need to think about how we're managing that coastal environment. Going to the agricultural runoff side of things, I think the ELM scheme, the Environmental Lands Stewardship Scheme, as part of the agricultural bill, is something that we're keeping a close eye on. It may be a way of compensating farmers or encouraging farmers to work in a more flood-friendly way and hold the water back. We do see farm gates being increased in size, and it's an issue that we do really need through working with the Catchment Partnership and with the National Farmers Union to try and address these issues. So there are things happening. As I say, the Environment Bill and the ELM scheme could be key to how we control this.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dave, very much. Have we got anybody else with any questions for Dave, please? That's the end of my list in the chat box. Anybody else got any questions? Yeah, right, if not, then we need to move to the recommendation. The recommendations in the report are printed on page 9, but I'm wondering whether Dominic has got some additions to that. So can I come back to you again, Dominic, to see if you would like to propose something for me? Oh, look at this.
You can.
Something I prepared earlier.
What am I sharing? The right thing? Yeah.
Yeah, you are sharing it, love. That's fine.
Yeah, okay, so there's my recommendations. The annual report includes a recommendation to continue to actively promote PFR to residents and communities where flooding cannot be prevented, and that Cornwall Council continues to fund the capital funding programme to facilitate this on a practical level. I'll look to officers to make sure this all makes sense. Planning committees receive training regarding the potential loss of flood mitigation measures when applications are lost to appeal with the Planning Inspectorate, and the Cornwall Council lobby the Planning Inspectorate to preserve these conditions at appeal. And in Cornwall Council lobby for consideration of the new Environmental Land Management Scheme options to encourage landowners to conserve wide coastal margins for the enhancement of maritime wildlife and the ongoing security and sustainability of the coastal footpath.
Right, and presumably you're doing the 1 and 2 that are on page 9 as well, so it'll be 4 and 5, yes?
Yep, as long as number 1 of mine doesn't contradict number 1 on the...
We'll get advice from Joe in a minute on that one. Mike Thomas, you wanted to come back.
Yes, just to reference the Environment Agency Helston issue, whether that would be added to number 1 as given, and giving the officer delegated authority to add that into the report once the information is found.
Right, can I come to Joe, Heather, to see if or Dave, and probably Dave first, I guess, to see if what Dominic is suggesting there makes sense and is sensible, is what you think would be useful?
I certainly recommend, number 1, I certainly agree with. Planning committees training, it's quite a difficult one because it's quite specific. I think perhaps we need to explore a little bit more the root cause. Certainly we do need to lobby the Planning Inspectorate. Number 3, conserve wide coastal margins, perhaps we could include fluvial and coastal margins within that. I'm afraid it's the autocorrect gets me every time when I write coastal and it changes it to coastal.
I can't stop topics, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. And so do you want to, do you suggest that we amend slightly the number 2 on there as well, didn't you say?
Well, I'm not sure if formal training is needed for the committees.
They're already aware of it, I think, aren't they?
I think they are aware.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just highlight it to the committees. Certainly keep lobbying the planning inspectorate.
Well, could it just be that we suggest that we lobby the planning inspectorate?
Yeah, and we can highlight the issue to planning committees.
Receive. Don't like training. What do you like? Receive. Reminders.
Well, no, because we think the planning committees are already aware of it. It's just that we want to make sure that the planning inspectorate don't ignore that, isn't it? That they don't lose it.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I haven't attended planning training much this year. I'm not sure planning committees are 100% aware of what happens when well, they just need to weigh up in the balance. I mean, obviously, when it's just one of the many things the planning committees weigh up, but they just need to, people need to be assured that when they refuse a development that is likely to go to appeal, there is a danger of flood mitigation being lost. And I wouldn't put this if it hadn't happened. It has happened in Cornwall as well as Devon.
Joe, could you come in and give us some advice, please? Joe Heather.
Yes, Chairman. So I suppose that it's about primarily it's about the planning inspectorate, isn't it? So I would say that maybe that 2 needs to be reworded so that the planning inspectorate part is first.
Yeah.
And then you could have and then if you feel strongly that you wanted to say something about our planning committees, it could be that it's just I'm trying to think of a different word rather than a notice sent to the planning.
I think the planning committees may it might be. I mean, we've got some planning councillors on here. Could I perhaps ask Fred Greenslade? I know you're on the meeting here. Could you give us some advice? Do you think that the planning councillors are already well aware of what's happening, or do you think this would be a sensible recommendation? Can you come in, Fred, and give us some help?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. I have indicated to speak.
Yes, I've just seen that come up, yeah.
I don't think by putting this in the recommendation would be helpful to the planning committees at Cornwall Council. I think as council planning members, we are fully understanding of what may be lost when things go to appeal. It's not only the coastal erosion and things like that, but it's some assistance with, let me think, sorry.
No, you're okay, darling.
But we lose sometimes benefits of road improvements. We lose improvements to educational funding.
Yeah.
And I think on one in St Austell, I won't mention where it is, but in St Austell, we lost £1 million worth of improvements when it went to appeal.
Yeah.
Although there were no costs claimed, we did lose out on all the improvements. So it's not just the coastal erosion problem.
Yeah.
So I think planning committees might take it as a bit of a disservice.
Yes, yeah, that's
mentioned in that way.
Yeah,
because
I think
we are
the
aware of what happens.
Yeah, can you see what Dominic's done to it now to number 2? That to me reads a lot better because it's just saying that Cornwall Council lobby the planning inspectorate. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that a lot better, Dominic. The other question was from Mike Thomas about, do we need to include in number 1 there about finding out about the Helston schemes, or will you just take that on board as an action? Can I come to Dave?
Yeah, I would just take it on board as an action, and I'll just amend that section to include an extra couple of paragraphs.
So we don't need to make a recommendation.
I don't think so, no.
Thank you. So now I've got Martin Alvey and then Andrew Long. So Martin Alvey first, please.
Thanks, Chair. So I was going to comment on that point 2 there. Councillor Greenslade as so much what I was going to say, but yes, I was going to make the point really that actually the planning committee training schedule involves every year or so. Yes. Either Mr. Watkins or Dr. Watkins or one of the sub officers comes and trains us about sustainable drainage systems and such like. So the committees are very aware of it.
Yeah, I think so.
The nub of it is ensuring that the planning inspectorate are aware of not just kicking out these conditions.
Thank you, darling. Thank you.
No more to say, really.
Thank you very much. Fred has covered it, I think very well. Andrew Long, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, but good morning to you all. Thank you very much, Carolyn, for allowing me to have a quick speech. Now, I think Councillor Greenshade has mentioned most of it. I think what it is important, I don't think it will be lost on. I don't think many committees will get upset if we reiterate the point. There are occasions where people's desire to oppose an application on one grounds might blind them to the fact that there is a risk of other issues not being dealt with when it goes to appeal. And I know officers do make that point when they come to it. I think it is really important that all councillors do look at that and not only planning councillors but councillors who bring applications to committee. So it's not just the planning committee itself, it's all councillors need to be aware of it, because sometimes it's their reason for bringing it to committee may well end up in actually reducing the quality of an application. And Councillor Greenstead mentioned the one at St Austell, which is a prime example.
Yeah, thank you, darling. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. So if we move back to the recommendation, we've got Dominic's 3 suggestions there. Joe, can you advise us about the ones that are printed in the report on page 9? How do we incorporate those, or do we need to? Are they a 4 and 5, or what do you think, please, Joe Heather?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So I think recommendation 1, which is about the so all the recommendations can be to the Cabinet Member for Environment and Public Protection. So Environment 1, I think we need to incorporate Councillor Fairman's number 1 there. So that needs to be subject to, and then it incorporated into recommendation 1 in the report. So subject to everything that Councillor Fairman has written there, and then it would be that the Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Annual Report, July 19 to June 20, as detailed in Appendix 1 of the report, be approved.
Right.
Because that's what you're saying, isn't it? That you want,
we need to make sure we approve that or recommend it.
You want that incorporated, and then subject to that being incorporated, then you'll recommend to Councillor Nolan for approval.
Yes.
Then I would put recommendation 2 from the report, which is about the local flood risk management strategy being approved, recommended for approval. Then I would put the lobbying of the planning inspectorate as number 3. And change Cornwall Council to the Cabinet Member for Environment and Public Protection.
I'm going as fast as I can.
Don't worry, you're doing my job.
It's impressive what you're doing there, Dominic. I'm impressed.
And then recommendation, which is now changed for 5 because of Councillor Fairman's formatting. That would also be the Cabinet Member for Environment and Public Protection as opposed to Cornwall Council. Then it's all within Councillor Nolan's, the recommendations to Councillor Nolan.
Right. Does that make sense to everybody?
I can read it out in a moment.
Yeah, that'll be good. That'd be good. Right, while Dominic is doing those amendments there, can I have somebody prepared to propose this? I guess Dominic would be proposing them. Could I have a seconder for these recommendations, please, as we'll get them finalised in a moment. Pauline, is that Pauline? Pauline is wanting to speak. Pauline Giles, you put your hand up.
No, I was quite happy to second it.
Okay, darling, thank you. So we're seconded by Councillor Giles. So can we sort of, Pauline, you've got your hand up still, my darling. Can we ask Jo Heather to read out the recommendations? They've been proposed by Dominic and seconded by Councillor Giles, and then take the vote on this one, please.
Yeah, just a moment, Chairman. Councillor Femin, have you finished doing your?
I haven't read it since I've finished looking around, but hopefully that makes sense.
Okay. Right.
Thanks, Dominic, for all that work.
So the recommendations now to the Cabinet Member for Environment and Public Protection are: number 1, that the Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Annual Report July 2019 to June 2020, as detailed in Appendix 1 of the report, be approved, subject to the Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Annual Report, including a recommendation to continue to actively promote property flood resilience to residents and communities where flooding cannot be prevented, and that Cornwall Council continues to fund the capital funding programme to facilitate on a practical level. Yeah. Recommendation 2, that the Cornwall Local Flood Risk Management Strategy 2020, as detailed in Appendix 2 of the report, be approved. Recommendation 3, that Cornwall Council... Order, doesn't it? So that would be that the Cabinet Member for Environment and Public Protection lobbies the Planning Inspectorate to consider preserving vital flood mitigation conditions at appeal. And number 4, that the Cabinet Member for Environment and Public Protection lobbies DEFRA for consideration under the new environmental land management schemes options to encourage landowners to conserve wide coastal and fluvial margins for the enhancement of maritime wildlife and ongoing security and sustainability of the coastal footpath.
Brilliant, thank you. And the item number 4, Dominic, as well, it's the Cabinet Member again. Right, so if you could take the vote on that, please, Jo, that would be lovely. Thank you.
So I just want to double check that from the 4 recommendations to Councillor Nolan that I've read out, that Councillor Fairman is still happy to propose and Councillor Giles is still happy to second.
Yeah, happy to propose.
Yes, happy to second.
Thank you. So now we'll go to the vote. So first of all, it's going to be a roll call vote, so please tell me if you're voting in favour, against or you're abstaining. So Councillor Martin Alvey.
For.
Councillor John Bastin.
For.
Malcolm Brown. Councillor Brown still isn't on the line. Councillor Nikki Chopak.
For.
Councillor Dominic Fairman.
For.
Councillor Pauline Giles.
For.
Councillor Fred Greenslade.
For.
Councillor Steve Knightley.
For.
Luke.
For.
Councillor Cornelius Olivier. Councillor Olivier is not on the line. Councillor Carolyn Rule.
For.
Councillor John Simmons.
For.
Councillor Mike Thomas.
For.
Councillor Kevin Towell.
For.
Councillor Towell, was that you saying for?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Thank you. So at the moment there are 14 members on the committee because we have 1 vacancy. There are 12 members in attendance at the moment and all 12 members have voted in favour. So the resolution has been passed, or the recommendations have been passed.
Thank you, Jo, and thanks Dominic very much for all your work there and bringing that together. That was very impressive, all the typing going on. Right, we're now at 11:08 and I'm proposing that we have a 10-minute break, just a comfort break for everybody because we've been on for quite a while, coming on for the technical check earlier on. So it's now 11:08, so can we come back again at 11:18 please? So if I can remind you to turn your cameras and your microphones off, because the stream will continue, the live stream will continue, but we'll come back again at 11:18. Thank you very much. See you again in a minute.
Thank you for your time.
I'm going to get myself a coffee. I'm going to get myself a coffee. Right, it is 18 minutes past. If everybody is ready to go again, please. Can we now start with item 6 on the agenda, which is the Cornwall Energy Recovery Centre, the roof damage and repairs. It's a report on that, please. And I know we've got external officers here with us to help us out on this one, to understand what's going on. So can I, in the first instance, hand across to Pete Marsh, please, to introduce everybody? Thank you. Peter, are you with us? Mr. Marsh, are you there, please? Joe, do you know if he's with us, please? Joe Heather?
Chairman, I'm just looking at the participants and it looks like
he was here.
Yeah, it looks like he's not in the meeting at the moment.
Sorry, Chair, I'd be very happy to introduce the topic in his stead.
Oh, Dale, thank you. Thank you very much. That would be lovely if you would get us out of that. Would be handsome. Thank you. So handing over to Dale Unsworth, please, if I may. Can you introduce the colleagues that are here as well, please, when it comes to...
No problem at all. If my colleague Victoria could just share our presentation slides, that would be brilliant. Okay, good morning all. Thanks very much for having us here today. I'm here to introduce the topic of the Cornwall Energy Recovery Centre roof damage and repair item for the committee before handing over to colleagues in Searle and Suez who will take you through much more of the detail about the incident. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so just to set the scene briefly, the Cornwall Energy Recovery falls within the integrated waste management contracts that Cornwall Council holds with its contractor Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited. The contract was signed in 2006 and restated in 2013. The contract runs until 2039, so it's a long-term contract and provides services to manage Cornwall's household waste and recycling. It includes many different facilities which are operated and maintained by the IWM contractor, including household waste recycling centres, material recycling facilities, refuse transfer stations, a closed landfill site and the Cornwall Energy Recovery Centre. Can we have the next slide, please? The Cornwall Energy Recovery Centre, or the CERC, is an energy from waste facility that commenced operation in March 2017. As many of you will know, the facility recovers energy from all of Cornwall's municipal black bag waste, preventing it from being disposed of at the alternative landfill sites. Can we have the next slide, please? Unfortunately, the CERC has experienced a series of events which have caused damage to the roof. They range between February 2017 and the third damage event, which occurred in February 2020. The facility, I think it's important to say, the facility has continued to receive and process Cornwall's municipal waste throughout the roof repairs and damage incidents with no interruption to the service that we have received. Cornwall Council has now appointed Mace as an independent consultant to ensure that the IWM contractor is undertaking a thorough investigation into the causes of the damage and that necessary quality checks are being carried out throughout the temporary and permanent repair process. And you'll receive much more detail about that in the coming presentation. As I've already said, the contract is signed between Cornwall Council and Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited. I'm pleased to say that we've got representatives from both Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited and Suez today to take you through far more detail about the roof damage and the temporary and permanent repairs process. A representative from Mace, Simon Gage, is also in attendance today. This will be followed by a question and answer session with committee members. In terms of introduction, I'll now hand you over to Steve Daughtry, who's our contractor's representative for Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited, and he will introduce the team that's in attendance today.
Thanks, Dale. We have a presentation that summarises the key elements of the report that has been circulated to the committee. Firstly, we'll do the introductions to myself and the Suez team, and then we'll look at the background and history of the roof defect issue, and then move on to what is being done to resolve it. Next Next slide, please, Victoria. So I'm Steve Daughtry. I represent Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited, SERL. SERL has a board of directors, but no employees, and subcontracts most of what it does, mainly to Suez. It's SERL that holds the contract with authority for the management of the disposal facilities. From Suez, we have Matt Ives, who managed the construction of the Energy Recovery Centre and is dealing with any legacy issues. We've got Patrick Dawes, who's responsible for the management of the whole operational contract across the county, and Victor Perez-Mares, who is the Suez Corporate Affairs Manager, covering communications for Cornwall. I'll now pass over to Matt Ives, who will present the remaining items.
Good morning all. Firstly, I would like to give you a bit of background as to some of the companies involved to let you know who and why they've been involved, because I will mention their names a few times throughout the process. So as it's shown on screen, we've got an extract of our wider contracting structure focusing purely on the civils related works. The EPC contract is with a company called Vinci Environment UK. They're the ones that were responsible for the construction of the Cornwall Energy Recovery Centre. But they then subcontract out the civils element to Vinci Construction UK, who some of you may already be aware of under perhaps a different name, Taylor Woodrow, a big UK civils company. They then in turn subcontracted out various parts of the scope of work. So initially RPS group have been involved conducting the outline design, the architectural design for the facility, which included the roof, following the various applicable British standards. They then Vinci also subcontracted out to a company called Weatherwise, who were the original installers of the roof during the construction phase. Unfortunately, during the construction phase in September 2016, Weatherwise went into administration, having completed most of the roof, but not all of it. Vinci then turned to their other roofing contractor, ABS Elbro, who were doing the installation of the roof for the associated bottom ash recycling facility. ABS Elbro then stepped in to complete the remainder of the roof to the EFW building. The other company that we'll mention a few times in the presentation is WRS. They are a local Cornish roofing company. They've been involved in making the roof safe, checking the roof after the damage, and also were employed by both Vinci to complete the repairs following the damage. Thank you, Victoria. Trying not to go into too much technical detail, but trying to give you an idea of how the roof is designed. I thought it'd be helpful to explain that the roof is actually made up of a two-layer system. What's shown on the screen is a slightly exploded view of that, just to show how the cladding system is installed. It's made up of an inner liner, that's the light green section at the bottom that provides the ceiling to the roof. You then have a supporting system that's surrounded by insulation that provides the insulation to the roof. With then a top layer, top sheet, which is the standing seam. You can kind of see it's sort of a U-shaped section where the interlocking panel, so the cladding is about 400 millimeters wide, very long sheets of it, and they lay them one next to each other and then go down the roof, what's called zipping, where they run a device along that locks the adjoining standing seams together over the top of the halter. So when I'm talking around the top sheet damage, it's that top section that's been that I'm referring to. Okay. As Dale mentioned in his introduction, we have had 3 damages to the roof of the circ over its course of operation. The first damage occurred in February 2017, whilst the facility was still in construction. And just showing you where that is on the roof, that's above the tipping hall, the blue box. The second damage occurred whilst in the operational phase and is shown on the picture there as the orange box. and the most recent February 2020 damage is the green box. As you can see, these all occurred in different locations. It's not been the same location. The only element is the most recent February damage. The green and the blue box there above the tipping hall do coincide, and there is an element of that was in exactly the same area. But as you can see, the most recent damage also occurred in a separate area on top of the boiler hall. Just to give you context of scale and height, these damages occurred right on the very apex of our roof. So it's around 45 metres above site level, so right at the top. As a little bit more background into the first damage, as I mentioned, it was prior to the facility achieving taking over acceptance. So it was before it came into operation. It was whilst the facility was still being constructed by Vinci. In this instance, the top sheet came loose. It unzipped itself and so pulled off a larger, longer section of cladding. And because of the exposure of the insulation with the wind, an amount of insulation was also blown out. Vinci contracted WRS very quickly to come to site to resolve and put the roof, make the roof safe to stop all of the insulation from blowing around. They conducted a root cause analysis, and that investigation identified that there was a missing section. The supporting rails that support the top sheet in that area were designed to be at a reduced spacing, but hadn't been installed. And this root cause investigation identified that this was most likely because the drawings issued weren't particularly clear. I've shown on the screen an extract of one of the drawings that shows the number of lines that are present on these drawings, and the confusion between a grid line on a drawing, a cladding rail and a supporting steelwork rail. It wasn't the most clear on that particular drawing. So it was certainly something that was identified for future use and repairs, that the drawings needed to be a bit clearer. Vinci then conducted the repairs between 24th of February and the 17th of March, where they installed those missing supporting rails, replaced the insulation and replaced the top sheet. Because of that design, there were two other areas of the site that had the same reduced spacing design. And so as part of the repairs, we also checked those other areas of the roof, that the smaller spacing of the cladding rails had been installed correctly in those areas. That was conducted from within the building. You can see where the supporting rails were, and in each of those instances it was confirmed that those rails were in place. Next damage, the second event occurred in December 2017 once the site was operational. Again, it was the top sheet that came loose. The insulation was blown, but the inner liner sheet again didn't suffer any damage, and hence the facility was able to continue operating. The O&M team contacted WRS, got them to site to secure the roof, to remove the damaged materials. Generally, the site kept running as normal. The operation, there was only 2.5 hours when the site was closed whilst we risk assessed the material. That meant that from a service point of view, we didn't end up diverting any material to landfill. The DFW was able to continue operating. Because of the wind-blown material, there was a short grid connection outage when the plant stopped generating, exporting electricity, to the grid, just whilst we cleared the substation of material. Again, a detailed investigation was conducted. This identified that there wasn't really a single root cause to this. There was no one particular issue. What it did identify was that there was a number of smaller issues that had obviously combined to create this impact. So Vinci therefore reinstalled the roof as per their design. There was no design changes that were needed between May and June. One thing that was identified during that investigation, though, was that the cladding supplier, as part of their continuous improvement process, had identified a slight change to the fixing, and that it appeared that some of the installers were aware of this during the installation, whereas some weren't. So there was an inconsistent application of this revised fixing detail. So Vinci, as part of having mobilised a roofing team to conduct the repairs, decided to also upgrade the entire of the verge around the roof to ensure that it was consistent with this improvement to Euroclad's fixing detail. As is shown on screen, what this simply is just one extra fixing on the supporting halters. So now getting back up to date almost, the February 2020 damage, again, this affected the top sheet. It came loose in two areas, the tipping hall and the boiler hall, as shown on the previous slide. The O&M contractor, the team identified again to get WRS very quickly to site. They removed the windblown material from around the site and the surrounding area and made the roof safe again. So in terms of stopping the exposed edges of cladding. Excuse me. As before with the second set of damage, the EFW continued to operate as normal. We continue to accept waste deliveries given that the risk assessment had previously been done, so there's no hours lost there. The waste continued to be processed. Once before, as before, there was a short grid connection outage again whilst the substation was cleared of insulation, so a short period when the site was not exporting to the grid. With this investigation, we decided to proceed in parallel to the EPC contractor's investigation. So Searle decided to conduct its own more detailed investigation, and we appointed a separate consultancy, a company called Michael Kilby Associates, who are experts in roofing and cladding issues. They attended site on a number of occasions to look at the damage, inspect the areas, as well as looking at the historic damage, looking at all the design documents. There's quite a lot of design information and documentation was sent over to them. They spent a number of months looking at it, identifying where they thought the root causes, considering both design and installation points. We were slightly delayed in that process because of the global pandemic, the COVID restrictions that were being put in place. So the investigation took a little bit longer than we'd initially anticipated and hoped. And from that investigation, Searle was therefore able to develop a strategy for how we would repair the roof. And in parallel, instigated discussions with the formal contractual chain. So Suez, as our project manager, so my team, we started discussions with a number of consultancies to look at doing a design review, design check, in order to develop and identify if there was a need to amend the design. We spent a number of months talking to a number of experts in the wind modelling field. Working back, we decided that the best window for conducting the repairs would be the summer of next year, 2021, when the weather was better. The long summer days meant we got more working hours, and that also allowed for the design check. However, to get to that point, we would obviously need to get through this upcoming winter. And so Searle decided to tender for a temporary repair to the roof in order to weatherproof it during these winter months, and therefore ensure that the roof was still in the same condition by the time we got to conducting the permanent repairs. So my team then conducted a tender assessment, looking at those temporary repairs. We went out to the market and got to the point of identifying a preferred bidder for conducting those repairs. And the anticipation would be those repairs would start around mid-November and be completed by the end of the year. In parallel to this, the EPC contractor was conducting their own investigation, looking at their supply chain, looking at what they would do to complete the repairs. And they developed a pack, a very detailed pack of what their proposals would be, and provided that to us at around the time that we were about to select our preferred bidder for the temporary repairs, and about the time that the report for this committee was being finalised. We therefore spent a couple of weeks reviewing the detail of that pack, looking at what designs had been done, looking at the methodology, etc. That was also reviewed by the expert that had been appointed, MKA, and we got ourselves comfortable that that design was robust. The EPC contractor had conducted a very thorough design review. They'd created a wind tunnel model in order to demonstrate that their proposals were robust. Their programme of works was very similar to what what we had been proposing, and they approached it in much the same way as what we had, where they were looking at doing an initial phase of works, which was going to be mobilising before the end of the year, and the main second phase of the works in the summer next year. One item that was different was that they identified that they would conduct the repairs using an equivalent system by a company called CalZip. And I've shown on screen a comparison between the Euroseam as installed on the left and the CalZip on the right. They're both standing seam roofs, both with a similar width, both with upstands, etc. And visually, a few examples there of similar facilities that have a CalZip roof. They are an equivalent product. The phase one works that Vinci were proposing were focused on repairing the damaged section of roof. The intention was to remove the cladding supports in the damaged section all the way along that leading edge. Because of the lengths of the cladding involved, it would be in replacement along the entire of those sections. And then replacing it with the new CalZip system, where supporting system, insulation and top sheets. Vinci have now started those repair works, and they've in the process of mobilising to site. And we are expecting, subject of course to the weather, as we're working at 45 metres high, to have those complete by the end of January. Vinci has implemented their quality assurance process, which sits on top of their subcontractors, their installers' own system. We as Suez are working on behalf of Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited will then regularly audit that QA system. And we'll also, as Dale mentioned, Mace having been appointed, provide access for Mace to also conduct reviews and check. We've also been engaging and making sure that the local community are updated with progress. So we've sent out some updates onto the community forum and onto our website, and we'll continue to do that throughout these repair works. So I'm anticipating there'll be a further update that's going to be sent out in the upcoming weeks around the mobile crane being erected on site. In terms of the phase two works, these are scheduled for the summer of 2021. This, because we're looking at changing over to the equivalent CalZip system, will require the removal of the remaining roof's top sheet and replacement with the CalZip system. Again, Vinci's quality assurance systems will remain in place, just like as they were in the phase one works, and we will continue to conduct audits and inspections and provide access for Mace to do the same. And similarly, we will continue to provide updates through the community forum and the website throughout those works as they're conducted. So in conclusion, the phase 1 works are on site. They are mobilising to site now, currently underway. The phase 2 repair works are going to be conducted in the summer of next year. And we have a robust quality assurance system in place at multiple levels with multiple levels of scrutiny and checks. And we'll be conducting inspections not only from a Suez perspective, but also getting Michael Kilby Associates on site to look at those.
Thanks, Matt. So to conclude, finally, I would highlight that there's not and will not be any disruption to the service. No waste went to landfill, and apart from a couple of short disconnections for safety reasons, electricity export has been maintained. You'll recall that this is the second significant issue that we've had with the Energy Recovery Centre, the first being the turbine outage back in 2018. These are parts the Energy Recovery Centre has performed extremely well with excellent availability, throughput and electricity generation. So for us, instances such as the roof damage are extremely frustrating, but we completely understand that for the residents of St Denis and other nearby communities, they're more than that. To have had the EFW built on their doorstep will not have been universally popular. So then to have panels and the underlying insulation blow off and land in the neighbourhood would have been unsettling for local people, and for that we are very sorry. Our experience is that if there are any problems arising out of the construction of these plants, they generally manifest themselves in the first few years and then settle down to routine operation. So although we can't give any cast iron guarantees, we think we're unlikely that we'll see similar issues in the future. Happy to receive any comments or take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve and Matt, and also Dale for introducing it, and for Vicky for doing the expert work with sharing the screen. That's great. I've got one or two questions that have come in already. Can you indicate an X in the box in the meeting chat box rather than a hands up if possible? I've picked up that Stephen Knightley and Pauline want to speak by their hands up, but it's easier for me because I can't watch both. So if you could put an X in the meeting chat box, that would be much appreciated. Before I go to the first question, or just to let you know that I've had an email from Councillor Malcolm Brown. He's having technical problems. I think he still is trying to get into the meeting, but his computer is playing him up this morning badly. So his apologies. If they could be recorded, that would be good. And as I say, he is still trying to get in to meet with us. So the first one that indicated was Stephen Knightley, please, if you could come in. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'll declare an interest in this in a way in that this is the profession I work in. So I'm sort of reasonably knowledgeable about this type of roofing and the crimping that goes on with it. And it would just clearly be seen as, well, from my point of view, as being wind damage. And clearly that plant is in a very exposed position. Mm-hmm. And the code of practice does actually give very high wind loads for designing any sort of structure in that sort of location. So in a way, it's a shame this wasn't realised and carried out properly in the first place. My question is, with all these remedial works that are now going on, I mean, hopefully they are not at the cost of Cornwall Council, which I don't suppose they are, but how does it ultimately impact on any guarantees that we have with that building?
Steve, can I come to you for a response?
Probably for Matt, actually.
The being conducted from our perspective, guarantees from the contractor. It doesn't affect the guarantees and warranties that sat behind the wider plant. Obviously, this is a separate part of the structure. So the actual technology, the processes that sit inside the building are unaffected, which is why we are able to conduct the repairs without impacting on the service.
Sorry, Caroline, that wasn't the question I asked. So you're making the repairs to the roof of the building. The building holistically would have come with some kind of guarantees over a period of time, or where remedial works might have been carried out, or snagging or whatever, although this is way beyond snagging. So I'm asking about the elements of the building that are being repaired. What guarantees do we have carried forward into the future, as you know, as the owners of this building, that what we're getting is a building fit for purpose and not something that in 5 or 10 years' time that we've actually got to carry out serious major works to put right what's clearly gone wrong at the moment.
From a technical installation perspective, we obtain the guarantees. So Searle, as the contractor, obtains the guarantees from the supply chain. From Cornwall Council's perspective, you've got a contract with Searle, and they're providing that the guarantee as part of that contract for the contract period.
Sorry, Matt, can I just add on to that? Under the contract that we have at Searle with the EPC contractor, they guarantee the civil works, so that's the building, for a period, I think, of 10 years. It might be 12, I'd have to check on that. Thereafter, any repairs become the responsibility of the O&M contractor. So I think it's fair to say that the authority is probably not exposed to any future reoccurrences.
I've got Pete Marsh has indicated he wants to speak. Did you want to add anything to that, Pete?
Yes, in essence, Chair, we've entered into a long-term to 2039 PFI agreement, and therefore the building remains maintained by others until that period. Beyond 2039, then it will revert to the council, but needs to revert in a condition that we're satisfied with. So there's a long lead in here before taxpayers pick up any costs in relation to those maintenance issues that are being mentioned.
Thank you. Steve, has that reassured you, Steve Knightley?
Yes, Caroline, thank you.
Thank you, my love. Right, the next one who's indicated who wants a question is John Bastin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I mean, the question from Stephen answered about 50% of what I was going to ask, but can I just ask, how many actual designs came in at the very beginning? And second part of that, why was this one chosen?
Sorry, just to clarify on that one, please. When you say how many different designs, do you mean designers or conceptual designs? Or
Yes, sorry, designers. And I'll add to that, one assumes some sort of wind assessment was done, pre-design, shall I say. I'm just wondering how many different designs you had and why you actually sort of went for this one.
So the company, the EPC contractor, identified and partnered with a designer. So that's the RPS group. They worked with them. I'm anticipating that they went through a tendering process in order to select RPS group for that design role. I don't know how many different consultancies they went to for that, but that's part of the design element. RPS only then did an outline conceptual design in order to develop the packages that would allow Vinci to secure the detailed installation. They would have again gone out to a number of suitable cladding companies with a design and installation package. So again, I'm not sure of exactly the number of companies they went to, but they will have gone out to the market. From that tendering process, they selected Weatherwise to do the EFW building roof, and they selected ABS Albro to do the IBA building roof. So just the fact that those two are there with two different companies would suggest that there was at least two tenderers, but I suspect knowing Vinci that there would have been a few more than that. And as part of their scope of works, they were required to do the more detailed design assessment of how they would build up that roof. And I'm aware that as part of the scope of works, both at an RPS level, but also at a Weatherwise ABS Albro level, there would have been a requirement to do wind modelling and to do CFD assessments. In terms of how many designs that RPS came up with or Weatherwise came up with to reach that, I don't know. I suspect they would be following the British standards, going through the design codes to get to the point where they have a design that was then presented and approved for construction.
Right, thanks very much. And you think, sorry, just to clarify, that would have at some point had a wind panel analysis?
I'm not sure that it would have done a wind tunnel in that design stage. They would have followed the British standards, which would have required CFD modelling using the specialist software. As part of this most recent investigation, Vinci has conducted a wind tunnel as part of their proposal to sell for these repairs. So I don't believe one was conducted in the initial design phase, but certainly for these repairs we have seen a wind tunnel model created. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it slotted into the presentation, but I do have a little picture of it.
Right, thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. The next one with the question is Martin Alvey, please.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, clearly the first incident was unfortunate and kind of expected with the teething troubles with the new building. The second was inexcusable, and I think when you get to the third incident, you're talking about a debacle on quality and design. Notwithstanding that, and Councillor Knightley has asked one of the questions I was going to ask about the future liability, and I'm satisfied that the 2039 date as being the point at which we're finally financially responsible for the structure. But my other question relates to clearly, does Cornwall Council not benefit from the energy generated by the plant in terms of we get some income from the money that we put back in the grid? So unless you compensated us for it at the time, those outages that took place where we didn't benefit, there has been a cost to the council taxpayer, unless you can confirm that we were compensated for that.
Peter, are you wanting to answer that one? I see you put an X in the box, Ken.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think in the period of the outages, the community fund gets a percentage of electricity sales, and Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited stood behind those payments as if the energy would have been generated. At the time, there's quite a complex formula by which the council contributes at times to electricity based on electricity sales values. And so at that time, it did not impact on the council negatively to be offline. That's the reality. So the community was made good. The council didn't suffer as a result of the outages, which were for only very short periods in any event.
Thanks, Peter. Is that anything else, Martin, or is that okay?
That's fine. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you for the question. The next one is Pauline Giles, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've just been scribbling away here. Things that have come to mind here is subcontracted to, who subcontracted to, who subcontracted to. When this happens, does this not dilute the area of responsibility? Confusion in the drawings. Why didn't somebody report that there was confusion before, so this was addressed then and not in the future? Euroclad fixing details. Some installers were aware, not others. Why was that? Wind modelling company. Where were they in the inception? I feel a bit like this is shutting the door after the horse is bolted. You know, this is a big thing. I mean, you reported that given there was a high incidence of wind in that area, why wasn't that a priority? I feel like this is a very much a hands-off process, and I hope that Cornwall Council as a whole will involve themselves a lot more with their future projects of this kind, because somebody could have got hurt if this had got out of hand.
Right, Steve, I'm not sure who's the best one to answer that one, please, those questions.
Quite a few questions there. I'm not sure I can answer them all. I mean, I think the nature of the beast is such that you get long supply chains with specialists at various levels needing to be subcontractors. So, yeah, I think not ideal, but I think this is the way with contracts of this type. If you want to add anything to that, Matt.
Just to agree that it is common practice to subcontract out to the people who are best skilled to do those works, and that means you don't get a dilution of the skill set. You actually get the right people to do the right job. It's about making sure that the right designers and the right installers are talking to each other. Apologies, I didn't catch all of those questions and make a note, so it might be, is it possible just to run through each of them in turn, Pauline?
Yeah, I just said there was a confusion on the drawing. Why didn't somebody report that at the time rather than address it in the future?
So from that perspective, we have thousands of drawings that are coming through, and the drawings that were being used, there was actually, I believe, around 3 or 4 different drawings that were being used in combination, and the information is all on the drawings. But it was probably, and we're having to theorise here because unfortunately the people who did those installs work for a company that doesn't exist, so we can't go and talk to them about it. But we believe that it was the case that there was some confusion. As is human nature, I suppose, people don't pick up and say it's confusing. They interpret and understand what they have on the drawing. It may have been very clear to that person who picked up the drawing, and they interpreted in that manner. So it's certainly a lesson learned from our perspective and from Vinci's perspective in terms of avoiding some of the clutter on drawings to make sure that they are clearer.
Right, and that would answer the Euroclad fixing detail as well, I would imagine. And the wind modelling, I mean, I would think that should have been something that was really, really important from the off. Given that it was in St Dennis and everybody knows it's like a windsock up there anyway, and there should have been more emphasis on that, and perhaps they might have thought about building it somewhere else. And there was one question that I didn't put in there. Have there been any problems on the similar building using the CalZip system?
Can I pick up for the first again, and I might, if I forget the third one, please remind me again. Yeah. In terms of the fixing detail, it is slightly different in that it was specified with the original design, and all the drawings were saying the original design. Because of the timing of the process, that was the case. That was the standard fixing detail at that point. The challenge was that there were obviously a few installers who'd been on the training for the updated fixing detail, so had just followed their training and installed that additional fixing point, even though the design hadn't called for it, which we believe is where that inconsistency came across. But obviously, because of the repairs being conducted, it made sense. Vinci agreed that they would go through and actually upgrade everything so it was consistent across the building, which is why we also then had updated drawings that came out of that.
Right, thank you.
In terms of the wind modelling was done and followed best practices, industrial guidance, British standards, etc. That calls for modelling using weather data, taking into account local topography, get my mouth right, which will take into account the unique nature, shall we say, of the St Dennis region. Yes, there hasn't been a wind tunnel assessment, but that's not required as part of a standard design process. So there was definitely a focus on doing that and following the British standards. The design has followed the right process. And in terms of, has there been failures on CalZip systems? I can't really comment on that because we're following what we know, and CalZip is one of the big cladding suppliers. They supply an awful lot of material worldwide, and there's an awful lot of buildings and structures with their material. So being able to say that we know that there has been issues on buildings, I can't say, unfortunately. We do know that they are a reputable supplier. They market themselves as one of the leaders in this industry, and they are used on a whole number of iconic structures. I only picked a couple there that showed sort of the curved nature of the CalZip roof because that's what we have at the Cornwall Energy Recovery Centre.
Okay, thank you very much. It feels like I've interrogated you, but we are part of the Scrutiny
no, that's
membership.
fine.
It's absolutely okay.
Yeah, that's our role, Pauline. Thank you, darling. That was really good questions. Matt Luke next, please.
Sorry, I'm just trying to put through my head all the questions everybody else has asked. I think I've been covered more or less to a certain point. I also work in the roofing industry, and any British standards that are given for Cornwall, quite frankly, are a waste of time. You know, they don't match up to the weather systems we get down here because they are so variable. As for the cladding company, I have, you know, actually installed some of that system myself, and it's not the cladding, it's the fixings. I think somebody, you know, way back along the line should have realised that there was not enough fixings upon this roof to, you know, to fix it properly. You know, because anywhere else in a lower topography probably would work fine, but the wind where it is at St Dennis, I know because I live not far away from there, is pretty horrendous. And I think the designer should have taken that into consideration, and we even said at the time that the roof on that building was way too big, and there was always going to be problems with it because it is so big. It is naturally going to catch the wind, and the verges and edges or stuff aren't double fixed like you would do in any other kind of roofing system. I generally work with slate, and that's what you do. This wasn't done in that building. So I think from the very beginning, quite frankly, it's been a cock up, and it's been a series of cock ups since. And I'm still I have very little faith that in future it's going to be any better. And I think, you know, as long as Cornwall Council aren't picking up the bill for it, that's fine. But it's the, you know, it's the health and safety of the people working on the site and the surrounding site that are at risk because of, you know, the roof of the building, quite frankly, isn't up to standard. I'll leave it at that.
Right, it's more of a statement, I think, but Steve, did you want to come back on that, or Matt?
No, not really. I'm not an engineer, but I bow to the greater judgment. But yeah, I accept what's said.
Thank you. Right, the next one is Fred Greenslade, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Luke has more or less said what I would like to say, perhaps stronger terms than I would have used. But nevertheless, I live in St Dennis, so I know what the wind is like and how we progress here. The first thing I would say is that one of the dangers to the village and Trevisco as well is the fact that these quite large sheets could be flying around in the air and hurting someone. Now that has happened 3 times. I think that's quite enough. We need something now which is positive and successful. So I hope going forward that we will achieve a sound repair to this building. Now, the second point is I've lived with the China clay industry in mid Cornwall all of my life. Across the railway, 50 meters away, we'll say 100 meters at most, there is a very large industrial building that belongs to Imerys, as they're called now, used to be English China Clays. As far as I'm aware, that roof, which is huge, has never had any damage of this nature, of this amount. So it says to me, there is an inherent fault in the design of this building. And I do believe, as Matt Luke has said, that the eaves and the design of the eaves has not been looked into soundly enough in the initial design stages to accommodate for the difficulties in Cornwall. I mean, we get wind from the southwest predominantly here, and that is where I consider the wind has damaged the roofing sheets. So it was possibly a problem that was going to happen because enough fixings wasn't applied at the time. Even the roof rails that were supposed to be there weren't there. So I think there is a bit of misreading of plans, perhaps not enough consideration to the initial design to account for the wind loadings in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Steve, I understand the concerns expressed by the local members actually at that area. 3 times for something to happen like this is I mean, once can be an accident, twice, you know, is care, but 3 times is really concerning. I know that Matt has told us that you're going to be doing temporary repairs, and they're on site doing that now, but the main work won't happen until next summer. What reassurance can you give us that that will be it then? That I know you can't guarantee anything, but this is, we don't want a 4th incident or a 5th, you know. Can you give us some sort of reassurance, please?
I accept those comments. I think all I can say is, as I say, I'm not an engineer, but we have employed the best consultants that we can find to look into it. The authority has appointed Mace as their consultants to review the work that's being done, and the EPC contractor again has got specialists looking at the repairs that are being undertaken, both the temporary and the permanent ones. So I would hope that, and bear in mind that it won't be at any cost, certainly to the council, hopefully not to us, although we've got legal issues to resolve. But I don't think any expense will be spared in putting in a robust and permanent solution.
I think the trouble is that it's you know, the people in the community there that could be hurt by these sheets, because they're huge sheets, aren't they? I think Simon Gage is with us on the call from Mace. Simon, could you give us any assurance, please, about what the process is going to be now? Simon?
Yes, hello.
Thank you.
Yes, so basically, I mean, our role will be monitoring the QA systems.
Yeah.
So we had a session yesterday on site where we sat down with the contractor and looked at the checks that will be undertaken on site, right from delivery of the materials to make sure that the correct materials are delivered, there's no damage, how they are stored, pre-inspections of the roof areas when they're stripped off to give an opportunity to identify anything else, that window of opportunity it gives us to look at the whole roof and to check what's there will be taken. And there's there's a stepping stone in the processes that have been agreed that makes sure that will happen. And then there's quite a heavy checklist that will be going on site to check that the repairs are correct, they've got the right drawings, they understand the drawings. So yeah, the idea is to make sure that we police the QA system as well as have the right QA system in place. As I say, we'll be involved in that. Sewers are involved in that. MKA, apologies, are involved in that too.
Yeah.
So multiple agencies are involved in that.
Okay. Can I come back to Fred as the local member there? Does that give you any comfort, my darling, that we've got an independent inspector going in and keeping an eye on things now?
Yes, Chairman, it does. And I would like to say that we've had discussions through Pete Marsh and through representatives of the various companies, and they're represented here and spoken this morning, and we've never had any problem getting answers to questions. Everything has been open and transparent. It's an unfortunate position we've been placed in, but I don't think there is any malice towards Suez from the village, really. There are 1 or 2 people that will never be pleased. If you gave them a gold watch every week, they would still complain about something. But we do have to be realistic. We are, as they say, we are where we are, and we need to address the situation and move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that, my darling, and thank you, Simon, because I think that reassurance is really helpful. Can I thank you, gentlemen, very much? It's been really interesting. The presentation that you've given, is that okay? Can we have that circulated to us? Because I found it fascinating. It would be really good to have that to go over again at my leisure. Would that be okay to share it? If Vicky can send it through to Joe Heather, would that be okay to share it with the committee members, please?
That's fine from our perspective, absolutely.
Thank you, that'll be lovely, thank you. Right, we now move to the recommendation then, please. The recommendation on page 96 of our report. This is a sort of a bit of a catch-all one. Has anybody got any views on how to take this forward as a recommendation from the committee? Dominic, I see you're put your X in the box. Would you like to go next, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And I just wanted to share my screen on, make sure I've got the right one.
You're going to do your wizardry again, are you?
Yeah, so how's that?
Lovely.
So I just wanted to do a slight amendment that we note the detailed information given in the report, and also I thought it was worth welcoming the public apology, which I sense I heard from Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited. So that was my proposal. I'm happy to listen to what other members feel about it.
Right. Has anybody got any comments on that, or Dominic is proposing it, or is there a seconder for that recommendation, please?
Chairman, it's Jo Heather, Democratic Services. Just to say that we don't know, I'm just looking at the recommendation, we don't normally have any form of noting, but I'm not sure that in this situation we can do anything else, because I'm not sure I'm not sure necessarily that endorse would be the correct terminology to use.
No, I think noting is best in
the live stream. That's all.
It is unusual, but I think in this instance, noting is the best wording. Yeah.
So I started with the word welcome, but I don't think it's particularly welcome news to a lot of people. So I thought note was more appropriate.
Yeah, I think so. Love. Right, is there anybody who would like to second that proposal for a recommendation on this report? Pauline, thank you, darling. So Pauline Giles is going to second it. Stephen Knightley, are you wanting to second as well, or are you wanting to speak?
No, I was just going to second.
Okay, love. I'll take it from Pauline because she was first, if that's okay. So we've got it proposed by this recommendation that's in front of you all now, proposed by Dominic and seconded by Pauline. Can I hand over to Jo Heather to take the vote, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Just for the sake of the live stream, Chairman, could Councillor Giles just verbally confirm that she's seconding the recommendation?
Yes, of course. Pauline?
I will second the recommendation.
Thank you.
So we've got a proposer of Councillor Fairman, seconder of Councillor Giles, and the recommendation is that the Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the detailed information given in the report and presentation provided by Suez Recycling Recovery UK on the Cornwall Energy Recovery Centre roof damage and repair programme, and also welcomes the public apology by Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited to local residents. So
would it, before we actually go to the vote, I just thought of something, would it be nice to, appropriate rather, to welcome the fact that Simon Gage is looking into, as overseeing things as well with Mace? Just if I can ask Dominic and Pauline whether you think that would be appropriate to add that in?
So I'd be happy for that if you want to just give me some dictate to me.
Just as a second. Yeah, just as a second thought, you know, that, I found it quite reassuring that it's an independent.
2011 CO2.
Sorry, was that Stephen? The oversight of Mace, I think, the MACE, I think. Peter, can you advise us? I see you put your camera on.
Yes, I think that's a welcome addition. I would just emphasise that the Mace are here as the council's oversight, and I recognise that the committee welcome that, but equally the repairs are the responsibility of Cornwall Energy Recovery and their O&M contractor Suez. And so we need to be cognizant of that.
So maybe we ought to say that, do we?
Oversight, they're not taking responsibility for the repairs themselves.
Yeah. So maybe we ought to say that as well then.
We could add something. The committee welcomes the oversight by Mace to the repair programme. Oversight by Mace to the repair programme on behalf of the council, but recognises that Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited and their subcontractor or their O&M contractor.
Could we have O&M contractor in full, please, if that's okay?
Yeah. Tell me what it stands for, yeah.
Peter, would you be able to advise?
Just hang on. My brain's going backwards a minute.
It's operations and maintenance, Dominic.
Thank you.
Recognise that Searle and their operations and maintenance contractor, Suez, have prime responsibility for undertaking
the costs.
The necessary repairs. I'm responsible for undertaking the necessary repairs in a professional manner. I'm open to suggestions from my colleagues if we think that I'm missing something there.
I've got one or two that have indicated they want to speak a moment, so if I can bring those in. I've got Matt Luke first, then Simon Gage, and then Fred. So Matt Luke first.
Oh, sorry, turn myself on. Yeah, I was happy to, was going to suggest putting some sort of this recommendation in or wording in rather, and I'm happy to second that. It's for the public to see that, that way, for the public's benefit basically more than ourselves and the council. So I'm happy to second that when
Pauline's already seconded
comes up with the wording and so forth. Yeah,
thank you. Simon Gage is next, please.
It's just really to reiterate. So we're oversight. We're providing oversight on the sort of the process, really. So we're obviously not stood behind everyone watching them fix every bolt. So
does what we've suggested there, does that make sense then to you?
I think so. Major repair program. Yeah, I think so. I think the bits have been added later. So obviously,
Thank you. And last but not least is Councillor Greensay, please.
Yeah, I've got a difficulty with the wording, Chairman. I think it gives the wrong context. The first 4 or 5 words. The committee welcomes the oversight by Mace to the repair. Well, that more or less says that they've missed something. Oversight means that they haven't taken something on board. It needs to be a different word to oversight, I think.
Right.
Chairman, would involvement...
Overseeing, perhaps.
Or involvement, Chairman?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you be happy with involvement?
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Does that sound better, Fred, to say the overseeing by Mace?
Yes.
Yeah. What does Mace stand for? Is that an acronym or is that the name of the company?
It's the name of the company.
Right, thank you. Right. So
agree with that.
Yeah, I think so. So can I ask Dominic first, are you happy with that revision to your original recommendation? And then Pauline, if you're happy to second it still. So Dominic, can I come to you first?
Yeah, happy to propose.
Thank you, sweetheart. Pauline, are you happy?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. So can I now, sorry, Joe, I come back to you again, my love, that we've now got the recommendation proposed by Dominic, seconded by Pauline, and can you sort out the voting for us, please?
Yes, but just for the sake of the live stream, I will read it out again so that we're clear, because obviously the public can't see the screen. So that the Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny Committee report and presentation provided by Suez Recycling and Recovery UK on the Cornwall Energy Recovery Centre roof damage and repair programme, and also welcomes the public apology by Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited to local residents. The committee, and this is number 2, the committee welcomes the overseeing by Mace to the repair programme on behalf of the council, but recognises that Cornwall Energy Recovery Limited and their operations and maintenance contractor Suez have prime responsibility for undertaking the necessary repairs in a professional manner.
Thank you.
So members, those are the 2 recommendations that you'll be voting on. Once again, we're going to do roll call. Please tell me whether you vote in favour, against, or whether you're abstaining. So first of all, can I go to Councillor Martin Alvey?
For.
John Bastin.
For.
Councillor Malcolm Brown, are you on the line? So Councillor Malcolm Brown is still having issues with his technology. Councillor Nikki Chopak.
For.
Councillor Dominic Fairman.
For.
Councillor Pauline Giles.
For.
Councillor Fred Greenslade.
For.
Councillor Steve Knightley.
For.
Councillor Matt Luke.
For.
Councillor Cornelius Olivier. Councillor Olivier, I think. I'm sorry, Councillor Olivier, was that you?
Yeah, just because I'm not saying anything doesn't mean I'm not here. All right.
Okay. And do you think you could cast your vote again? Because I think I talked over you.
I'm not used to that.
Apologies.
Right, okay, 4.
Thank you. Councillor Carolyn Rule.
4.
Councillor John Simmons.
4.
Councillor Mike Thomas.
4.
Kevin Towell.
4.
So for this vote, there are 13 members voting out of the 14. Well, obviously, once again, we have 1 vacancy on the committee. So I can just confirm that the vote is unanimous with 13 votes in favour. So the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. And can I thank all you gentlemen for your help there. It's a complicated topic, so it was really interesting to get that presentation from you. So thank you very much for that. Now, by my reckoning, is now 12:23. I want to break for lunch now, if I may, for half an hour. So if we come back again at 5 to 1, and we will come back then, and the first item on our return will be the review of the impact of the seasonal dogs on beaches restriction, that protection order. So if we come back again at 5 to 1, that's 12:55, that will be really good, and we'll start off with that particular item. And can I remind you that the live feed will be continuing, so if you turn your cameras and microphones off, that will be really helpful. Thank you very much, and enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Hello, Steve. Hello. Hello.
Hello, who's that?
Hello.
Hi, Stephen. It's Edwina.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
I seem to be
we're on a lunch break.
Meeting. Pardon?
I think we're on a lunch break.
Oh, do you know, I just went to the loo and came back and the screen was completely black and I thought, what's going on?
I must admit I dipped out for a minute, but no. So people are there, but they're not there.
No, okay, I didn't realise they stopped so early.
And I didn't catch what time to come back, but
no.
I think it is a natural break. If anybody else is listening.
Remember the live stream is still live.
Is it?
Back up 5 to 1.
There you go.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you, Cornelius. How are you, mate?
Right.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Members, the live stream is still running, so please, we shouldn't be having any other conversations.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I knew I shouldn't have said that about Julian. Oh dear. Right, back up 5 to 1.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's back again and has managed to have a nice cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Welcome back to the Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We're now going to resume the agenda at item 7, which is the review of the impact of seasonal dogs on beaches restrictions, public spaces protection order. Quite a mouthful, isn't it? I think Kevin Brader is with us. Kevin, can I hand over to you, my love, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I will share my screen and start my presentation. Bear with me a second.
Thank you. That's working. Thank you.
Okay, I'll put it on. Is that large enough?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, this is the review of the impact of the new seasonal dogs on beaches restrictions public space protection order from summer 2020. My name is Kevin Brader. I'm the Community Protection Team Manager from Communities and Public Protection Service. So on 14th of February 2020, the portfolio holder for Environment and Public Protection signed off an individual decision for the new PSPO for dogs on beaches for restrictions in Cornwall, which had been in place for 3 years. The individual decision made involved some changes to the recommendation put forward to the portfolio holder by NOSC on the 16th of January 2020. And NOSC has asked that officers undertake a review of the impact of the new restrictions over the last summer period. Just for information, the current restrictions, so for beaches without blue flag status, the restrictions commence on the 1st of July and cease on the 31st of August. And during the months of the year when the restrictions are in place, the daily restrictions commence at 10 AM and cease at 6 PM. For beaches with blue flag status and seaside award status, the restrictions commence on the 15th of May and cease on the 30th of September. And during the months of the year when the restrictions are in place, they commence at 10 AM and cease at 6 PM. So there are currently 43 beaches where seasonal dogs on beaches PSPO applies. The review takes into consideration the impact of the new restrictions on these beaches, and it also considers the impact on beaches that are not covered by the current PSPO. So the review has 3 elements, which we've looked at. The first one is the council held service request record, so that's complaints and inquiries and an enforcement action that we hold as a service. The views of town and parish councils, and we undertook a survey of town and parish councils recently, so the views are considered within the review, and any other comments and submissions that have been made directly by the public to myself and Councillor Nolan and other councillors that have been forwarded on to me. So when looking at the review and the service requests, you'll see the table there highlights the number of service requests that have been made to the council regarding dogs on beaches in 2018, 2019 and 2020. And you'll see that this year the total number of service requests is 252. Last year it was 234, and you'll notice there is a difference in dog fouling complaints. Dogs prohibited, so that's dogs that are on prohibited beaches during the prohibited times, and complaints about dogs on leads. So, getting a bit of interference there. So that table there shows the difference in service request records over the past 3 summer periods. Beaches where most complaints or inquiries were received over the 2020 period have there's 38 for Poleseth, 25 for Gillen Bays, 16 Porthtowan, 14 Porthminster, 13 for Porth at Newquay, and 12 for St Ives Harbour. We've undertaken numerous patrols over the summer, and you'll see that there's 344 patrols have been carried out over this summer period, and there's greater details of that contained within the report itself and the associated documents. And this is quite a significant increase on last year of 71 patrols and 2018 of 55 patrols. But to put in context the previous table about the number of service requests, if I can provide some context on that, if I compared the number of inquiries and complaints that the council receives for dogs on beaches compared to other complaints we receive, certainly within my team, noise and nuisance complaints for 2019-2020 financial year, we received 2,309, and for fly tipping on private land alone, so not including public land, for 2019-20 was 620 requests for service from the public. So we're comparing 252 requests with over 2,000 for noise and nuisance and 620 for fly tipping. So just to provide some context of how that number of complaints and inquiries compares with other parts of the service. There was we set up a new system this summer, scoring the patrols we undertook to sort of monitor the number of dogs on beaches, and this was something we haven't done in previous years, but we thought it would be a good way to check compliance levels on beaches. So on 182 patrols undertaken by officers within the community protection team, no dogs were observed on any of the restricted beaches. On 46 occasions, there was 1 dog observed on a restricted beach. On 49 occasions, between 2 or 4 dogs were observed, and on 19 occasions, 5 or more dogs were seen on beaches. And that was just within officers of community protection. Other work we've carried out this year is renewing our responsible dog ownership approach, and there is a new responsible dog ownership leaflet that's published on the council's website. We had intended to produce a sign which mirrors the slide you can see now, which would go out to public areas and beaches this summer, but unfortunately, due to COVID responsibilities within the team and responding to the enforcement requirements, that has occurred to the team, is that we have not been able to get that done to date. We have had assistance from the council's civil parking enforcement officers, who also have been out checking beaches during their parking enforcement duties, and you'll see there that on daily patrols between May and September at Crackington Haven, they've seen 8 dogs on beaches. At Crooklets Beach and Bude, 138 dogs. At Poleseth, 187. Trevone Beach near Padstow, 5 dogs, and Porthtowan, 1 dog. And between May and June, officers did not witness any dogs on any of the beaches on the patrols they've carried out. And between May and July, on Porth Beach, Newquay, they saw 23 dogs. And during 4 patrols at Porthmere Beach, St Ives, 7 dogs, and 4 patrols at Porthminster Beach, 1 dog. And during 3 patrols at Carvis Bay, St Ives, they did not observe any dogs. I mentioned earlier the Town and Parish Council survey, and this is a snapshot of that survey, and the survey itself is available. Supporting documents. 10 respondents strongly agreed that the sorry, I'll start again with that. The Town and Parish Council survey responses show a mixed response to non-blue flag or seaside or beach restrictions, with 10 respondents strongly agreeing with the restrictions. 12 tended to agree, 6 neither agreed nor disagreed, 6 tended to disagree, and 8 strongly disagreed. 32 out of the 42 respondents felt the times and restrictions were adequate. 47% of respondents felt that dog fouling on beaches was an issue in their areas. 40% of respondents felt that dog nuisances were an issue on beaches in their areas. 56% of respondents felt that the current signage was not adequate. However, some of the town and parish councils have responded on more than one occasion to the survey, and that can be picked out within the raw data and the supporting documents in the web library. Some of the comments, and just to give a flavour of the responses from the town and parish council survey. So dog fouling, dogs urinating on people's possessions, dogs stealing food, very few dogs on leads, therefore running wild, often chasing children. Fouling, feces and urine, dogs off leads, which can be scary for some people, dogs on beaches where people are bathing. Clearer and larger signage at entries to the beaches, although this is a problem between the two main beaches, especially at low tide. I think that relates to a specific beach and can be picked out in the supporting documents. And again, bigger and more visible signage. Other comments, so Falmouth Beach Management Group preferred the previous restrictions and would like greater local stayover restrictions. Mevagissey Parish Council agreed with the current restrictions in their area. St Gennis Parish Council needs for clearer signage at the entrance to the beaches and would like restrictions from 8 September and for them to be 24 hours a day. And Visit Cornwall provided comments saying that to keep the current restrictions, but to increase general comms on responsible dog ownership, as this will benefit visitors and locals. We've received emails from members of the public relating to dogs on beaches, and a flavour of the comments relating to those that would like to see greater restrictions is that the beaches, some beaches are too small to accommodate dogs. Concerns of children being knocked over, dogs barking causing annoyance to neighbouring residents, concerns about the effects of dogs fouling on beaches, dog owners not adhering to the restrictions, and would like one beach designated as a dog-free beach in Falmouth, dog poo bags being left on beaches, dogs on crowded beaches, dogs stealing food from people on beaches, dogs intimidating vulnerable people, dog owners not being in full control of their dogs, less beaches time available for people wishing to or with a need to visit dog-free beaches, and insufficient signage. There have been comments where people have been in favour with restrictions, and certainly some of the themes coming from those people happy with restrictions is it helps to keep people fit, reduced travelling to beaches where there are restrictions, clearer beach restrictions, fewer beaches with restrictions, chose their holiday location because they could access the beach with their dog, being able to use beaches with dogs in the morning and in the evening as a benefit. There have been contacts to myself where they would like less restrictions, and these all related to Porth Beach in Newquay. We would like restrictions should only be within the busy months of July and August. Would like better local decision making for dogs on beach restrictions. Requests for larger signage, and other themes are requests for larger signage on beaches and improved signage about health risks and more prominent signs, and some of the other comments there. Other factors for consideration, and it should be given to the impacts of the pandemic in terms of dogs on beaches. Beaches have had a high profile during the lockdown period and lockdown easing, and consideration should be given to the behaviours and attitudes to enforcement following lockdown relaxation, and a degree of confusion around whether or not restrictions were in place during lockdown easing, and one example of that is potential confusion between what relaxations of parking restrictions compared to maintenance of the PSPO around dogs on beaches. And certainly we had to change our enforcement approach during this time period to reflect the to reflect the 4E's engage, educate, encourage and enforce approach which the council's adopted during the pandemic to get people to be compliant with all forms of legislation and not just the COVID regulation requirements. And we should also have consideration to the council's priorities at the current time, including the service's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact it has on resources, and the focus on what are the main priorities and maintenance of core services at the moment. So there are three options that are on the report. The first is a recommendation to maintain the existing PSPO until 2023. A recommendation to amend the PSPO with a necessary consultation, and I'd say that it's captured within the report that the necessary consultation would be a 12-week consultation, and a recommendation to keep the same restrictions but a review again in 12 months. What I would say from the review, and whilst there is no officer recommendation within this report, is that there, as is always related to dogs on beaches, there are two distinct groups. There are a group that would prefer to see greater restrictions for dogs on beaches, and there is a group that would like to see access or free access to dogs on beaches, and those groups, as is apparent in all consultations that we take on this matter, are very apparent. But one theme that seems to be common, and from my opinion, what is common between the two, is that signage seems to be an emerging theme for both parties. So the recommendation within the report is the committee considers the report and makes any comments accordingly. And
thank you.
That's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Rob Nolan, are you with us at the moment? Because I wonder whether you wanted to add anything, because I know you and I have both had lots of emails from different people. Rob, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for letting me speak. Yes, I have had a good number of emails over the last 6 months and phone calls. So I'll thank Mr. Brader there for a very thorough report and for the support he's given me over the last 6 months in responding to all these emails. Signage is the one clear thing that emerges from this, that we need larger signage and more better signage. So a question I posed for the committee, it's been suggested that we put a contact number or email address on signage. You know, we can't possibly run wardens on demand. So if we put a number on, it risks people being disappointed and saying, well, I phoned the number and no one answered, or I emailed and no one came, whatever. But it would give us an indication of where there were problems. I'm just not quite sure how we'd go about it. Start date, we had our disagreement on that. I thought the consultation said one thing, you preferred the simplification of having everything on the same day. As we look at the complaints from various places, we see that perhaps one size doesn't fit all. Different areas have different issues. Falmouth and St Ives particularly came through over the period as town beaches that are very busy and used, almost as parks. I had a phone call from somebody at 8 o'clock in the morning. They'd taken their 3-year-old to the beach and a dog had weed on the child. And they were furious, quite rightly. But I don't know that we're going to do anything now that would stop that happening. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. I think it was May, before the controls really came in. They would like to go back to 24/7 April to the end of October. I don't know if you're going to consider that or not. Enforcement is also something I'd really like to hear your comments on. We've tended to go within education and encouragement, engagement, but I think people want to see a bit more than that. But I'd be interested in your views. And COVID next year, everything's going to depend on COVID again, whether we can really tackle this. But I would welcome your views on enforcement and signage. I'll listen to anything else you have to say. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Kevin, did you want to come back in on that, Kevin Brader?
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of the signage, we've done a really good exercise this year, where we have looked at those beaches, and we know which beaches where we get less compliance on now from our scoring system. So if we do look at signage as a way forward and review the signage and improve the signage, then we have got a focal point using the evidence we've gathered this year to identify those locations where signage may be an issue and focus our attention on those. So I think signage is definitely something that we can look at and improve on. In terms of formal enforcement this year, yes, we have taken the 4E approach, but also this was taken in relation to actually, looking at our officer risk assessments and protecting our officers as well from face-to-face conflict and putting people in harm's way in a COVID context as well, because issuing a fixed penalty notice on a beach is a confrontational situation which puts you in direct contact with members of the public in a potentially aggressive way. So we've had to protect the staff. So it is a special year, and I think beach use this year has been different from previous years as well. And people have gone to open spaces, they have gone to beaches because they've steered away from indoor activities and using outdoor facilities more. So it's very difficult to compare this year to previous years. It is very difficult to do that, I mean, this has been a summer unlike any of us have experienced before. So, but I think looking at signage is definitely something that we can do, and we've got the information this year to help with that, to focus our attention accordingly.
Thank you, Kevin. I've got quite a lot of questions. With your indulgence, colleagues, may I go first? The COVID implications, what worried me on one of the slides there, you showed that there was the 201 was up, very much up this year, 201 problems, but it was only in a very short period. That was only 2 months, whereas normally you would be comparing it over several months, because the restrictions were only in place in July and August, and because of COVID, people weren't allowed down here until July. So that worried me. The original intention of this public space protection order was that the consistency was needed. That was what we said on the Scrutiny Committee last time you brought it to us. That was the whole premise of doing the big consultation that we did. We wanted consistency and clarity, and we ended up with a little bit of a muddle as far as I'm concerned, my personal view, because we got two different versions. There's one if you're a blue flag beach and there's one if you're not. But having said all that, as you've just said, COVID was such a major implication, and I know your team were really busy and still are working on the COVID implications. So I don't think there's an awful lot that can be done, and I'm not sure that actually the figures that we've got now because of this are very representative because of the COVID situation. I've got a couple of things I would like to ask, if I may. If there is no material PSPO change, could the council please provide a list of beaches that are available next Easter and during the summer, before and after the typical working hours, which it's reasonably certain will be as free of nuisance dogs as before the PSPO changes, and detail the specific budget allocated to achieve that? That's one question, if I may, in a minute. And also, I think really when we get to, well, I'll keep that one until we get to the recommendations in a minute, because I've got a suggested recommendation, if I may, when we get there. So can I work down through the list, please? The first one is John Bastin, please.
Thank you, Chair. And question for Kevin, please. To expand on the signage, of the owners who were contacted, do you have a ratio of what I'll call people who would regularly use the beach, a local person or a visitor type person?
Thanks. We haven't contacted members of the public directly. It's the in terms of the people that have contacted us, it's both elements, to be honest. I mean, we've had, and Councillor Nolan will probably be able to say this as well, is that we have emails from residents from within certainly sort of St Ives, Falmouth, Truro areas, as well as up in Bude and North Cornwall as well, but also from visitors. And I can't put a percentage on those contacts, but it does come from both residents and visitors.
Right, sorry, I mean, what I meant, I think, if you physically contact the dog owner to say, why is your dog there? Do you know whether they're local people or non-residents? You know, that's what I'm really asking. Going back to the signage concept, that perhaps local people would know and others wouldn't. You know, it's
certainly when we talk to people, it's generally face to face. Rather than, and if we get to the position of serving a fixed penalty notice, then we would take their address and identify them as either visitor or resident. Clearly before the 4th of July this year, when we had issues of dogs on beaches on the Blue Flag and Seaside Award beaches, then the majority of those were local people, because obviously that was before the restrictions were lifted. And this is where we come to the point that it's a very unusual year for us.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, John.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you. Kevin, could you give me a reassurance on my question as well before we go on to the next
Yes,
speaker?
sorry, yes. So regarding providing a list of beaches, there's not a legal requirement for the council to provide a list of beaches that aren't restricted by a PSPO, and I'm not sure regarding any other responsibilities or legal responsibilities placed on the council to provide a list that you've mentioned in your question. And given looking at the report and the evidence within that, there's not a lot of clear justification for the council to provide such a list. But it would be, I think, in an enforcement sense, it wouldn't be wise for the council to provide a list that would indicate a certain degree of security or safety in areas where the council is likely to have limited control. I mean, if we look at the previous years, there have been complaints of dogs on beaches when dogs shouldn't have been on beaches. And if I put it perhaps in a different analogy, that would be akin to perhaps providing a list of roads through our towns and villages where we can guarantee people wouldn't be driving above 30 miles an hour. And I don't think it would be wise for local authorities to provide guarantees like that.
I don't think I was needing actually a guarantee, but an indication would be helpful, because I think that, as you said, that there's two very distinct, there's the dog owners and the ones that haven't got dogs, who are genuinely concerned for the safety of their children, because some children are frightened of dogs. It's just an indication of where they might be able to expect that there wouldn't be dogs on a particular beach between a particular time. That will be helpful, I think. You're muted, Kevin.
Sorry, I pressed the button by accident. I mean, the only thing we can provide is a list of beaches where dogs are restricted from.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I don't guarantee anything, but that's just an indication would be helpful, I think, to the members of the public who are not dog owners and might be frightened of dogs. But thank you very much for that, darling. The next one is Martin Alvey, please.
Thanks, Chair. And as a reminder, the recommendation that we made at the beginning of the year was actually proposed by me, and clearly was disappointed that the harmonisation of the time didn't take place as we recommended, and I still stand by that as being the solution I would like to see, although I was grateful that Councillor Nolan did take our other recommendation relating to moving the time from 1700 to 1800 for the bands. So yes, in an ideal world, I would like to see our original recommendation not complied with, taken on board. Notwithstanding that, just to put my cards on the table, I'm not a dog owner, but I do like dogs a lot. I have nothing against dogs, and I want to put on record that I acknowledge that the vast majority of dog owners are totally responsible and will comply with the restrictions that are in place. So this is not a get at dog owners either. Like I'm sure the other members of the committee, I've had quite a number of emails over the past week or so, people realising that this was coming up for debate today. Not one of the emails I've had has been from people supporting the current restrictions, or indeed dog owners saying they want less restrictions. Every email I've had is from people who are not happy with the current restrictions. Now, I accept that an awful lot of the concerns that they raise relate to enforcement rather than whether or not a dog is allowed to be present on a beach at a particular time. And I appreciate that the subject of enforcement is a thorny one. Yes, more enforcement would be nice, but we're not going to get to a position where there can be somebody watching every beach all the time. What I also I'm quite pleased to hear what Councillor Nolan said earlier on in his recognition of the significant difference with town beaches over other beaches in the way that they are used by the residents of that town. And I grew up in Falmouth, so I know that in the summer people will be on particularly Gillingvays Beach up until dusk in quite great numbers. And one of the things I would like to see happen, and it may be a recommendation at the end of this, is that certainly the major towns with beaches have the opportunity to nominate one of their beaches as a 24-hour dog-free beach from the 15th of May to 30th of September bathing period. So the likes of Newquay, St Ives, Falmouth could designate one of their beaches as dog-free, and that would then enable those individuals, and we've all been contacted by them, who perhaps have children, perhaps have had adults with learning difficulties, that they have people who they will want to bring to a beach where they can be absolutely sure that they're not going to see a dog, and perhaps where the beach itself is not going to be particularly crowded. So maybe you want to come down to that beach of an evening or early in the morning. So I would like to see a bit of working with town councils to enable some towns, or those towns with a number of beaches, to designate one as dog-free. And the final point I'd like to make, and this wouldn't require consultation clearly, and it has already been highlighted, what the other thing that we did observe on or recommend back in January was around the signage, and I do appreciate that COVID made that difficult to enact, but I do obviously see that the need for improved signage, but clearly that won't require any further consultation. That can just be pressed forward, and the idea of the A4 that's on the website being turned into a suitable sign, that would, I think, would fit the bill. Nothing more to say at the moment.
Thank you, Martin. I don't think there was a question as such there, but very useful comments.
I thought I wasn't sure if we're just asking questions or we're debating and putting forward.
No, that's fine. That's fine, my love. It's all relevant debate, but I don't think there's a question to put to Kevin, is there?
Well, perhaps the one question would be, would it have to be a county-wide consultation for a town to introduce a restriction or a ban on one of its beaches, or could that just be done locally?
Thank you. Can we ask Kevin that one, please? Do you know the answer to that?
It's a very interesting question. I know we've done full public consultation for all of the beaches last year. I think it's all about question of is public interest really, and given that people will access beaches from outside of particular towns areas, then it would probably be reasonable to carry out a consultation that involves wider than simply the town where the beach is located. I think that would be the fairer approach.
Okay, so the answer is it wouldn't require a consultation. They can't just do it.
Well, the only Cornwall Council can introduce PSPOs as it stands at the moment, so you would have to follow our consultation process.
Okay, to vary, we need to do consultation. Thank you. Next speaker is Nikki Chopak, please.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you, Kevin, for your report, but also obviously thank you for your support locally. Obviously, I'm look after Poundstock, which has St Genny's, Crackington Haven Beach, and also Widmouth Bay within its division. So I appreciate that I over the last few months, you and I have spoken quite regularly about the issues specifically more at Crackington Haven. I'm sort of pleased when I heard Councillor Nolan say right at the beginning that I think it's been realised that this particular order doesn't fit all, and I think that's become quite obvious over the last few months. I appreciate that COVID has brought out some different behaviours of residents and visitors, and I think that's been become more obvious, more so in Crackington Haven, because as you well know, well, Kevin will know, we organised for two residents to become beach wardens effectively, and they were able to be trained, which unfortunately due to COVID meant that that training was slightly delayed, but that then meant that they were able to use the 4 E's, if that's the right word, to make sure that dog owners were responsible on Crackington Haven Beach. What probably is, I'm sort of going the wrong way around, and obviously Carolyn touched on it. The figures are slightly skewed, I would argue, because of those beach wardens which were now on Crackington Haven Beach. They had to ask dog owners 21 times, not the same dog, obviously, to leave the beach. So those 21 individuals are not named in those figures that you are privy to. So I think the figures are skewed. So I think we have an issue really around how we're, enforcing the orders, and I think that we need to rethink the orders generally. I think Martin's point earlier around beaches being allowed to still possibly specify that they could be dog free. Again, I speak from Crackington Haven's point of view. They have historically always had a dog-free beach, and it's always been, well looked after. We've never had a major problem with dog poo or any of the other issues that attract dogs to the beach. And I have asked this previously to Kevin in emails as to why individual parish councils can't ask for public space orders, particularly now we've got this sort of blanket approach which doesn't fit all. So that's my first question really, as to why parish councils can't ask for individual orders. I wanted to also enhance or reinforce the signage request, because again, as you know, particularly on Widmouth, we have an issue with two beaches being adjacent to each other, one which is totally dog friendly and one is a blue flag beach, so that causes issues. So I'm not sure how to solve that particular issue, but obviously I think it still needs to be looked at quite seriously. And also I wanted to ask why we struggle to try and get that message across even on the website. If back along while we were still in COVID lockdown, the website was very poor in its interpretation of which beaches were dog friendly, which ones weren't. And as I say, I think we really need a sort of a new messaging system out there anyway. So that's the main questions were around obviously why we can't change individual beaches, and also why we can't actually sort of take on board some of the comments made by individual parish councils. We seem to be still having that blanket approach, so I'd appreciate your comments on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. Kevin, can you assist on that one, please?
Well, what I can answer the last question about the website information is that what we uncovered over the summer was, if you access the dogs on beaches list or the dog restriction list, if you access it via a laptop, for example, it shows the whole list in its entirety. It's the mobile phone facing part which visitors have to scroll to the bottom to the read more button at the bottom of the page, which then expands the list out, which shows the full list of dogs on beaches restrictions. So that's where that confusion came from. In terms of individual town and parishes carrying out their own PSPOs, as I said before, legally they can't. There's no provision within the Act for them to apply their own PSPOs. In terms of approaching Cornwall Council for them to make orders on their behalf, then that is potentially possible. However, obviously it would require quite a lot of resource, and I can't really speak on behalf of the council's legal services department, but it would fall to them to consider each application individually, and there would be individual consultations needed for each request, and then an individual order made for each area. So I can't comment on whether or not another service creating those orders would be comfortable or have the resources available to do that.
Okay, thank you. I suppose the main thing is that it's legally not possible then to do them individually. Nikki, is that okay, darling?
Yeah, can I just come back on a couple, obviously not on two things, so I've just thought of something else. But obviously, yeah, I understand about PSPOs in that way, but because obviously in this case St Genny's had an order previously, which obviously was banning from May through till September. You know, theirs is one of the smallest beach at high tide. You know, so you're allowing dogs onto a beach with less than 100 square meters of space at high tide, and so I still question whether actually one box fits all, and I would be wanting to know, and I'm sure the parish council, if they were here, although I know Barry Jordan is here in his capacity as a councillor, would want to know why we've got this blanket approach when actually we can quite clearly see that actually a blanket approach just doesn't work. So I mean, again, it's more of a statement than a question, but I think that is key to this debate.
Thank you, Nikki. That's very. I mean, it's a valid point, isn't it? That's what's causing the problem, I think. Mike Thomas is next, please.
Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, I feel this is more of a dog's dinner of a problem than I realise. I'm like Councillor Alvey. I'm not a dog owner, and I like to hope that I am fair to both sides. But it strikes me from what I'm hearing, and thank you, Kevin, for your presentation. Both Councillors Chopak and Alvey sort of identified locality as being part of the solution, and it seems like governance and legality of this seems to be preventing a sensible way forward. I mean, I recall back in the 80s when we had district councils, we had the Penwith dog warden van that used to go around gathering dogs, and I'm not suggesting we go back to that, but maybe working with a town council like Falmouth, where they actually decide locally that to have a precept to actually pay for a dog warden, that would actually give them the capacity to sort that sort of local problem out. So that's my sort of observation and supporting what the previous councillors have said. I also think it's a much bigger problem in terms of all of Cornwall needs to have a say, and that the consultation, I get the impression from Kevin that not every council replied, and I don't think even in the past Helston would have replied because it didn't have a beach. But I think we need to make people aware that obviously people living in the towns will take their dogs to the beaches, and the councillors should have an opinion about that and share their views. And finally, sort of an issue about enforcement. Earlier on, we talked about 5G and the capacity for technology solving this. This problem is being faced by other councils around the world, and they are identifying dog DNA as a way of enforcing fines rather than having to have face-to-face conversations with owners. In Gibraltar, for example, they even require owners to pour water onto urine. So there is a sort of tendency, I think, worldwide to recognise that enforcement can use technology. Obviously, that doesn't sort out of control dogs. But Kevin, do you agree that perhaps future gazing, that perhaps the future might be for all dog owners to have their dog's DNA provided, so that will solve the issue of feces?
Hi, thanks for that. I have it reliably advised to me by a member of Devon and Cornwall Police that actually you can actually extract DNA from feces, and that those sort of measures are not actually accurate in terms of determining dog ownership. Whether or not technology's changed in the last couple of years, I don't know. But I mean, we're always looking for new ways to improve. What I will say regarding the debate that is going between a Cornwall-wide and a local approach is that we go back to the consultation from last year. Is one of the key themes that came out of that was for harmonisation, and obviously that's how we have ended up in the position we have now, and that's in response to the consultation that was carried out last year.
If I may just come back, I think in terms of DNA, I think I would defer to veterinary science with all due respect, rather than to Devon and Cornwall Police.
Yeah, the only reason I say is that is because it was mooted about using it for human suspects, that's all. Okay, well, I think Northern Ireland, the councils there are actually exploring this themselves at the moment. It requires obviously to have a data bank of dogs, but there we go. Thank you. What about the issue of a dog warden in the town council? Do you think that's possible based on what you've just said? And what we have been doing over recent years is actually training up enforcement officers who work for town and parish councils via our community enforcement programme. So there are enforcement officers that work, for example, in Falmouth and in Newquay who are trained to issue fixed penalty notices for issues such as fouling and dogs on beaches in their specific areas, and they go out and do patrols sometimes alongside our guys and sometimes independently. So there's always scope and there's always ways that we can work with our town and parish colleagues to help improve and increase our resource and our information gathering.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. In the chat box, Loveday has just put in that Exeter University have perfected the technique about the dog DNA. So that's very interesting to know. Right, next questioner or speaker is Matt Luke, please.
Sorry, I turned myself on and off again. I think we went through a huge consultation last year. I don't think we are in any position to do another one like that again for several years, let alone 2 years' time. I think it will come up with exactly the same results as we had last time, a 50-50 situation, which will never be compromised. So I think we've got to go for the broad brush thing to cover ourselves, and it doesn't fit everywhere, we know that, but it's the lesser of two evils. The question I would like to ask really is if we of Cornwall Council would put more wardens on to cover the beaches and other things, Kev, would you think they would be pay for themselves with the extra business we would incur in fines, etc.? You know, because I know you're really hard pushed with the team you got, and you always have been. Is it a time to step up and put more feet on the floor, as it were?
I mean, in terms of capacity, we have increased our capacity in recent years, and you'll see in terms of feet on the ground, we've upped our patrols this year, and we work very closely with the parking enforcement guys. So the amount of eyes on the beach this summer have been greater than they have in the previous 2 years, and the evidence within the report supports that. As with all things, if it's, I don't think it's going to be, it would ever be self-funding. because by its very nature, if you get greater compliance, then you're going to issue less fixed penalty notices. so it's not going to sort of perhaps pan out quite like that. But I think what we have been very successful with over the last few years is really, excuse me, all my notifications come through at once. What we have been really successful with is increasing our capacity in a really effective and efficient way by engaging with town and parish councils and looking at multi-skilling other officers within Cornwall Council, like civil parking enforcement, which just increases the number of people out there with eyes and ears and the ability to tackle issues. And that goes, alongside the incident report cards that we've done training on in the last couple of years as well for local elected members to report back to us. So there's plenty of eyes and ears out there at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. Colleagues, I'm very conscious of the time, and we've got 10 minutes before we're going to have to break to switch over the live feed to the second Teams meeting. So I've got 4 more speakers. We'll go as far as we can, but I think, Kevin, if you can stay with us, we're going to have to come back with the new setup. I think it has to be done at 5:02. So next speaker is John Simmons, please. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
I can go worse on that. Mine's been really already answered, but especially by Martin, because I think all of us have had these emails from people. I mean, I'm not a dog owner, but I like all animals. I'm more of a cat lover than a dog. But I really do think I can only talk from my little beach here in Flushing. When the dog ban actually did come in and people came off lockdown, because the Falmouth beaches had the bans, they all used our beach, and at one time there was more dogs on the beach than there was people. But when the owners go into the water for a swim, their dogs are just running wild on the beach. I really do think signage and more control is that's what everybody wants, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Thank you. Dominic Fairman next, please.
Yeah. So as quick as I can, with regard to signage, I think if at the bottom of each sign there was a signpost towards the cornwall.gov.uk/report-it mechanism, that would lower expectations of people that would be an immediate response, but also gather important data. I'm a bit concerned, and I'll get Kevin to respond to it later, that the town and parish summary, 60% of town and parishes said they would not renew their Blue Flag or Seaside Awards in 2021, and I wonder what that was down to some of the work we've been doing here, or perhaps you could comment on why that is. But thirdly, and more importantly, I've listened carefully to all the other members' debate on this. It seems to me that the key problem here has been the harmonisation. And I think it's been a bit of a red herring, because Cornwall Council only has ultimate control over about 15% of beaches anyway. So my suggestion would be, and brace yourselves, that in line with Cornwall Council's commitment to localism, the town and parishes that have beaches have the opportunity to commission a local consultation to tailor restrictions to their locality through a Cornwall Council PSPO. And by commission, I mean fund. So we have the restrictions in place. If places like Falmouth don't think it works for them, and they want to have a local consultation, and I feel that would be the localism answer to that.
Thanks, Dominic. Did you want to come back on that, Kevin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Dominic's first point regarding the point about the feedback from town and parishes regarding Blue Flag, that's something we need to explore deeper, and I'd probably be best to work with colleagues in the environment team like Julian Sharp to sort of establish that, because he oversees that wider Blue Flag Seaside Award project. So it's perhaps some feedback from me to Jolyon on that point. Did you want me to come back on the final part?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you could just give us the practicalities of that.
In terms of providing local decision making, obviously really key to that would be locally provided enforcement as well. certainly around if areas were to extend restrictions beyond what Cornwall Council resources, then there has to be an expectation that local town and parishes patrol, enforce those restrictions in those areas. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask, and actually that needs a sort of clear, documented understanding from the onset as to where the responsibilities lie.
But some towns and parishes already do buy traffic warden time off the council.
Yes, yeah, that does. But I think, I mean, in terms of the difference in resourcing with, and say for example, there are 40 to 50 civil parking enforcement officers, and there's not as many people in my whole team covering noise nuisance, fly tipping, abandoned vehicles, and all the other realms of things we do than in the civil parking enforcement team.
Thank you. Now, colleagues, Joe, can I bring you in, please? Because I think maybe for safety's sake, we need to stop this for the moment. I've got Barry Jordan and John Fisher. Are you able to stay with us? Because I think we need to stop and switch over the feeds thing. And I'm not sure the technical way of doing that, but that has to happen, I think. And then we'll come back to this again afterwards, and I'll bring you two in first. Would that be okay with both of you, Barry and John? Is that okay with you?
Certainly okay with me, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, darling. And Barry, can you stay with us? I've lost him for a minute. Right, well, and I've got you down as well, Cornelius. I can see that you want to speak as well. So, Joe, can I come back to you and tell me how we actually handle this one? Do we need to break for 5 minutes, or how long do you need to swap over the feeds? And do we stay on this, as members stay on this same meeting invite, or do we need to come out and come in on another one?
So just to confirm, Chairman, that we do need to have a break. So you'll need to turn your microphones off and turn your cameras off and take a break. I would suggest, it's 13:52 now, so I would suggest that we give our colleague in Democratic Services who's going to change the live streams over. If we give her the 8 minutes until 2 o'clock, then she'll have adequate time. Brilliant. What you need to do is please do not leave this meeting. So everybody who's participating in this meeting must stay on this meeting. The live stream is only being changed over for the public who are viewing it. Okay, so we all need to stay on this meeting. We're purely doing this because the live stream we've got at the moment will run out in a minute and the public need to go on to a new one. So if we could take a break under that basis and stay on this meeting, please. And then when we come back at 2 o'clock, it'll all be changed over.
Okay, thank you for that, folks. I'm sorry about this, but we've slightly overrun, but then it's a lot of things that need saying. So we're going to break now. So if you turn your cameras and microphones off, but stay on this meeting, and we'll come back again at 2 o'clock with the new feed. I'm sorry about this, but that's what we need to do, I'm afraid. So if we turn our cameras and microphones off, and we'll see you all again at 2 o'clock. Thank you.